Ajnanaatimirandasya Jnanajhanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Ya Kundendu Tusharahara Dhavala Ya Shubhra Vastravrita Ya Veena Varadanda Manditakara Ya Shweta Padmasana Ya Brahmachita Shankara Prabhitibir Deve Sada Vandita Samam Patu Saraswati Bhagavati Pudi Pradam Sharade Pudi Pradam Sharade Jai Gurudev everyone. Welcome. So, my topic for today is taken from the 47th verse of the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
第6章47节
And what I endeavor to do with you guys today is to take you on a short journey. The journey is essentially unpacking what yoga is, not in the traditional sense, but what yoga is for us. Why is Guruji saying again and again, become a yogi? Then what I also want to explore is if we are not yogis to begin with, what are we? What holds up yoga and what holds up the opposite of yoga? So this is what I'm going to endeavor to do. I hope it can be useful for you and help you in growing the devotion. So understanding what a yogi is. When Arjuna and Krishna, or when Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, he was not 25. He was closer to 90 years old. Given that human beings aged differently at the time of Krishna, and given that Krishna and Arjuna are children of the same year, so they are the same age. And a lot of stuff can go down in 90 years. The way that we think, what we believe, is well established by the time we are 25. So let's say that they were 25. What are the responsibilities of Arjuna versus Krishna? What is their relationship with one another? Right? So Arjuna is related to Krishna in a few different ways. First, he is his cousin, then he is his brother-in-law, then he is his friend. These are the three main relationships that they have with one another. And if you read in the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is saying to Arjuna is, I'm giving you information because you are dear to me and I love you. This is the bottom line, the baseline. I love you, I love you, I love you. That's why I'm making this information available to you. So what is very well defined for Arjuna is who he is and what he's here to do. Right? Given that he's born as a Kshatriya, which is the ruling race, right? He has the responsibility of protecting his family, of extending the generation, etc. These are his responsibilities. It's really clear to him. He has received one of the best educations possible. So, for all intents and purposes, he is an ideal man. He's at the top of his game. He's the best archer, apparently, that has lived. So he has focus, he has dedication to his guru, he has imbibed all the information necessary. And still, chapter 1, and still, so even with all of that information, with all of that knowledge, with all of that, what he's been running his whole life, still chapter 1, I cannot. 人就发生了第一章说
And
我
so
不想
if you
战斗。
look at the number of people that are on Kurukshetra, it is said to
所以你
be
看一下
about
在巨鹿之
3
野的所有
million
的人
people
数，
were on
据说有
Kurukshetra.
300万人在巨鹿之野。
And of all of the 3 million people, he chooses only
所有的300
one
万人
person
中
to speak to
，Krishna
because of
只
the
选择了一个人
relationship.
来说这些，是因为
He
他们的
chooses
关
one
系。
person.
他选择了一个
And so
人。
Arjuna says to Krishna, please take me
所
to
以
the middle
Arjuna
of
对
this
Krishna 说：“把我带到
war
这个
field. I
战
want
场
to
的中
see
间，
who am
我想要
I
看一看
going to fight
我
with and
是
who
谁
is，
我在
supporting me.
我是要谁
So
与
they
战斗，
go-
谁在支持着我，
who is driving the chariot?
谁
Krishna.
在驾着那个战车呢
To the
？Krishna
middle of this war field. And the conversation doesn't last long.
去到了
It's
战场
only
的
about
中
an
间，
hour.
他们
So in that
那个对
hour,
话也
Krishna
大概
gives
也只
everything
持
that
续
is
了一个
required
半小时这
for
样，
Arjuna to
所
live
以
his
Krishna
life.
给了阿朱那
Right? He
所有一
reveals
切他所
The
需要的，
secret
让
of
他能
yoga
够
to Arjuna.
完成他生命的所有的知识。他揭示了瑜伽的奥秘。
So imagine how much investment
所以
it took
想象这需要
on
有
the
多少
part
的
of
投
the
入，
Lord, how much investment it
在
took
上主的那边，
to
他需要
bring
有多少的
Arjuna
投
to
入，
this place.
能够让阿朱那被带
In the
到这
previous
一个
birth,
位置上。
God took two
在过
forms,
去世，
Nara and
神有
Narayana.
2个形态 ，Nara 和
In that birth,
Narayana。
Arjuna was Nara.
在内世当中，阿朱那是 Nara，
They had to fight the demon
他们要
Sasrakavach.
战斗，跟 Sasrakavach 这个恶魔战斗。
But it's like having a hand.
这就好
The
像
hand
是一
is
只
not
手，
independent from you.
手
It is
它
completely
不是离
dependent.
开着你的，它
on
是
you.
完完全全依赖着你的。
Imagine if your hand
想
was
象一下，你的
independent,
手如果
had its
是独
own
立的，
life and thought,
它有它自己的
and
生活，有
chooses
自己的
still
想法，
to serve
然后
you.
它仍旧选择来服务
This
你。
is the relationship between
这就
the
是
Bhakta and the Lord.
在巴塔奉爱者与上主之间的关系。
Before we discover yoga, we are like a
在我们探
hand.
索瑜伽之前，
You belong
我
to the
们就像一
body,
只手，
but you
你属
have
于这
no
个身体，
awareness
但是
of
你
your
没有意
belonging.
识，你属于谁这个意识。
You do so many actions
你做好多的行为行动，
because your form dictates it.
因为你的这是由你的形态决定的。
But do you experience
但
the
你是
sense
否
of really
体验
belonging?
真正的归属的那种感觉呢？
So, where does this yoga fit into our lives?
这个瑜伽
Answer
如何融入我
anyone.
们的生活？
Where does yoga
有人
fit
能回答我吗？
into? He says, become a yogi,
他
become a
说
yogi, become a
成为一
yogi.
位瑜伽
Where does
士，
it
成为一位
fit
瑜伽
into
士。
our lives?
那么它如何
Is it the
融入我们
most
的生活
important
呢？
thing? Is it the
这是最
least
重要的
important
事情
thing?
吗？
It reminds me of a Whitney
还是它
Houston
是
song,
最不重要的
Saving All
事
My
情
Love
呢？
for You.
它让我
The
想
lines
起
are,
一首
a
歌
few
，Whitney
stolen moments is
Houston
all that
的
we
那首
share.
歌，
You've got your family
把我所有
and
的爱
they
留
lead
给
you
你。
there. Though I
歌
try
词
to
是这样的，
resist being
是
last on your
我
list,
们仅有
I'm
的共
saving
同
all my
的全
love
部就是
for
一点点的愉
you.
快的时光。
When
而
I
你的
first heard
家
that
庭
song,
需
it
要
was
你了。
clear that this is a
我把我所有
married
的
man
不是
having an
你名单
affair
当中的
with
最
an unmarried
排最
woman.
后边的，我把我所有的爱都留给你。
And
我
they
第一次听到
steal
这首
to
歌
be
的
with
时候
each
很清
other.
晰，他是一个已婚男人与一个未婚
Then one day we
女
were
子
driving
之
in
间
the
的
car,
恋情。
and the song came on the radio, and
但是
suddenly I understood, oh my God, this song
有一
has
天我在开
everything to do
车，
with
然后听
God.
到这首歌在收音机里播，然后
A
我突然意
few
识到这
stolen
首歌意
moments
味
is
着
all that
我
we share
们
with
与
Him.
神的所有一切，
When we are
就是我们
forced
所
to
拥有的
do
只是一
whatever
些
our spiritual practice
愉
is,
快的时光，无论
Those
任
are
何我
few
们做的任何
moments.
事情，我们的灵性的练习就是这些时光
and。you have your family, they need you
你有你的家
there.
庭，他们需要你，
And even though you are patent to Him,
哪怕你是属于他的，
what does He do?
他
He
做一
lets
些什么
you.
呢？他放任你，
So He's always the one waiting.
他一直是
He's
等待
waiting
着
in
的
the background, He's waiting off
他在后台
stage,
等着，
He's waiting.
他
He's
在台下
waiting for
等着，
you
他
to
在
have a
等着
relationship with
来
Him.
等你与
He's
他有一
waiting
个
for
关
you to
系。
engage in the highest
他在
yoga,
等
which
着
is devotion.
你参与到最高的瑜伽，那就是放
And so you
爱。
spend yourself, you
所
spend
以
your
你
time
把自
on
己
so
自
many
己的时间
other things.
花在这么多的其他的事情上。
So what are the opposites of
那
yoga
么与之相
and
对
being
的，
a
与
yogi?
瑜伽相对的，
So I will
以及
introduce
与
you to
成
a
为一位瑜
word
伽师
today
相对的呢？
that has about 35
我给大家介绍一
meanings
个词，
in
它有
Sanskrit.
35个意思，
So each of the meanings is connected to a
其中每
different
一个意思
how to
都
say
是
a
与一个
different
不同的
spiritual
怎么说呢？
tradition,
灵性的传统
right?
相关的。
Each of them is connected to a different spiritual tradition.
每一个意思都
But
是一
before we do
个
that, let's
不同的灵性传统
read the
相关。
verse. So
在我们开始之前，
this
我们
is
先来读一下
chapter
我们的诗
6 of
节。
Bhagavad Gita and verse
这
46.
是《家梵
So it
歌》
says,
第6章46
The
节，
yogi
是这样
is
的。
considered to be superior to those. No, that's not the verse.
不是这个
She
诗节，
inserted
封
the
错幻灯
wrong
片了
verse.。So it says,
是这样讲的。
verse 47.
47
Of
节，
all yogis, those
在所
whose
有的瑜伽士
minds
中，
are always
头脑
absorbed in me
一直沉
and
浸于
who
我之内的，
engage in devotion to me
参与对我
with
的奉爱
great
的，
faith,
带着
them
巨大
I
的信心，
consider the highest of
我
all.
认为他们是所有中
So
最
let's
高的。
unpack and reverse
我们
engineer
来
the
展开一
verse.
下，然后再回
So
溯
he
一下这个
says,
世界。
Who
所以他说的
considers
是，
them the highest
谁
of
认
all?
为这
He
些的
does.
呢？认为他们是最高的
And
呢？
what is required? Great faith
所需要的
means
是
that
什
there
么
can
呢？
be
巨
absolutely
大的
no
信心，
doubt.
意思是
So we'll
绝对没有
unpack
任何
doubt
疑
in
虑。
what just now.
我们把那个疑
So
虑
of all
给
the
剔除出去了。
yogis, those whose minds are
所
always
有的瑜伽士
absorbed.
中，
So
那
always
些头
means
脑
a
完全一直
continuous
沉浸于我
awareness,
之内的，
not a
意
few
思是
stolen
持
moments,
续的意识，
a
而不是一
continuous
点点的
awareness.
时刻时光，是持续的
Not when I'm
保持
desperate and I
意
need
识的。
something and I want to
而不
have
是
and I
我绝
need and
望
I
的，
am
我
and I
想
want
要
and I
一些什
want
么
and I
东
want.
西，
Not then.
我想要这个，我想要那个，不
Always.
是那种时候，而是说一直。
What does it mean always? Always means
一直意
always.
思是什么呢？一直的意思就是一直，
It doesn't mean sometimes. It
不是
means
说有的时候，意味着一直。
so do we know how to do always?
我们知道该怎么做
Of
一
course we
直
do.
吗？当
Yes,
然
we
我们知
do.
道，
But what do we
是的，
do
我们知道。
always about?
我们一直做的是什
What do
么
we
呢？
do always about?
我们一直做的
It's
是什么
always
呢？
about
一
me.
直是关于
I, me, I. We are
我。
I specialists.
我们是关于一个
It's
我
always
的专
about
家，一
I.
直是关于
And
我
what are
自
the
己。
things that hold up that I? The things that we really need, that we
那
can't
个
live
支撑着
without.
我的那些呢，就是我们
And
没
what
有
are we
离开
seeking
他们不能
for?
活的那些东西。我们追寻的呢是什么呢？
So it's like you are in a desert
就好像你
and
在
the
沙漠
sand
当
is
中，
made of diamonds.
而且
but
那
all
个
you
沙是
need
由
is-
钻石做成的，但是你所想要的就只是，
Does the diamond mean anything to you in that
什么呢？
situation?
然后在那种情况下，那个钻
So
石对
Guruji
你
has
来讲还有意
explained
义
that
吗？
It
所以
must be
公子
such
解释
that you
过，
become
一定要
or
是
you
这样，
yearn
就
for
是
the Lord
你
the
变
same
得
way that a
你
fish
渴望
does when
神
it's out，of
就像一条鱼
water.
离
It
开
must
了
feel
水
like this.
渴望水一样，一定要是这种
But how
感
to
受。
get there?
但是怎样才能做到呢？
Okay, so now let's look.
好，
So
我们
the
来看一下
classic definition of the word yoga is
yoga 瑜伽
to
这
be
个词的
yoked
传统的
with
定义是
right?
与
So when we look at
连结，结
yoking,
合。
or you know what a yoke is? Not an egg
你
yolk,
们知道
but you know what it means to yoke
yoke 连
something.
结这个词的意思吗？
So when you want to
是与
plow
什
a
么东西
field
连
in the
结？
old days, what did you need?
在古代的时候，如果你要
When
离
you
开
wanted
地，你
to
需
plow
要
a
怎么
field,
做
what
呢？
did you need?
你需要一些
You
什么
needed a
东西呢
plow and you
你要
needed
离地的
what?
话，你需要一个
You
犁
needed an，
还需要
oxen
什么
or
呢？
something, right? No, never a cow. Always a male animal does
永远
this
不是
kind
奶
of
牛，
work.
一直是那个
The
公
cow
的
is
雄性的动物
for
做这些事情。奶
Right?
牛
And
是
so
用来
then
挤
what
奶
did
的。
you need? So you needed that,
然后
and
你
you
还需
needed
要
a
什么呢？
yoke. So the yoke is that
你
which
需要一
attaches the
个
plow to
车
the
轭，是把那
animal.
个犁。
So if
安
yoga
在动物
means
身
to
上
be
的那个
yoked
车
with
轭。
what?
瑜伽意思是
To be yoked
连结
to
与
and
什么
with
连结
God.
呢？与神。
So Patanjali describes it as living
所
in
以
the
我谈
awareness
伽
of
利
consciousness.
描述说，持续的生
So you
活
are
在
in the
持续的
flow of
处在
your
意识的
connection
觉
to
知之中
God.。Like that story
你
Guruji
一直
tells about
处
what
在
is
那种与神的
electricity.
连结之流
And
中，
it's difficult
就
to
像 Guruji 讲的
explain.
故事那样，关于
And
电，
so somebody
电
asked
很难
what is
解释啊，什么
electricity?
是
And
电，
then
所以有
the
人问
person
说
didn't know how to
电是什么呢？
describe.
然后
So
那
he
个人
said,
他不知道
well,
该
I
怎么
cannot
解释，
tell you
然后
what
他说
electricity is, but I can
我
show you.
没有办法说
So
明白，
he
但是我可以给你
removed the
看。
light bulb from
所
the,
以他就把
and
那
he
个灯
put his
泡
finger.
拿走了，
And then
然
he
后把手
said,
指伸进去，
that is
然后他就说
electricity.
啊，这就是电。
So the same. So you
同样的。
cannot be in yoga without
你无法
effort,
在瑜伽中
right?
而
And so
没有
what
做
we
出任何
already
的
see
努力。
very clearly is that we know how
我们非
to
常清晰的已经
effort,
能看到了，是
and that we
如何
are
做出
by
努力，
nature very disciplined.
以及我们
We are
的
very disciplined
天
in
性是非常
preserving
的自律，
ourselves, both
在
physically,
保留、保护
mentally,
我
and
们自己，
emotionally. We
我们
want
的
to
身体、
keep
情
what
绪、
it is
精
that
神，
we
我们想要
have,
保留我
and we
们
want
所
to grow
已
it,
经拥有的东西，并
right?
且想让它
So a
增
lot
长。
of stress and distress comes
所
from
以有
trying
好
to
多
get
的
something
压力，好多
and
的
then
悲
trying
伤，
to
来自于想
keep
要获得一
that
些东西
something.
并且想保留
Is
着
it
那些
clear so
东西。
far? Right?
大家目前
So
还
what
清
we
晰吗？
have is where we are.
所以我
What
们所
we
拥
have is the
有的，我们
instruction.
就是
Become a
在这里。
yogi. What we have is that
我
we
们要有
know
的
that
指
we are
示
not
是，我们要成为一位瑜
yogis.
伽士，所
What
以
we
我
have
们知
still
道
to
我们
see
还
is
不是
what
瑜
we
伽士。
are. And what
我
needs to
们
be done
人
to
就要看
transition
是我
into
们
that
是什么，
yogic
我们如何转
lifestyle.
化或者过渡成
What
为
does
一
it
个瑜
mean
伽
to
士的
be
生活
a
方式
yogi?
呢？那么成为
Right?
一位瑜
So
伽士
another
的意思
definition
到底
of
意味着什么呢？
yoga
另一个瑜伽的
that
定义，
can be more operational for us is to
对我们来
exist
讲就
in
是
a
比较好
state
操作
of
的，
equanimity.
就是
Where you are
处在一
equanimous
种泰然处之的
means
状
that
态中，
it doesn't matter
意
what
思是你
happens,
泰然
you
处
are
之，
the same.
意思是无论发
So
生
it
什么，
doesn't
你
mean
都是一
our
样的。
life is going to be a bed of
并不是说
roses
生
Or
活
it
就
does,
是像玫瑰
because
花床
roses
那
grow
样轻松
together
自
with
如，或者
thorns.
它有可能因为玫瑰花它是和那
So
个刺一起成
in
长的，
entering the relationship,
要
right,
进入
with Krishna,
那种关系
did
与 Krishna 的
Krishna
关系。
guarantee Arjuna that everything will be
Krishna
easy?
向阿朱那保证说
Did he
一切东
guarantee?
西都会变得容容易易的吗？
Yes or
他
no?
有保证吗？
Why
有还
didn't
没
he
有呢？
guarantee
没有。
that everything will
为
be
什么他没有
easy?
保证所有一切东西都会变得很
Because
容易
it's
呢？
not supposed to be.
因为就不应该呀。
When Arjuna was growing up, he had a
当
love
阿
for
朱
the
那长大，
bow and arrow,
他对
and he
弓箭
wanted
有
to
了很
become
强
the
烈的爱
best，at
所以
it.
他想要成为
So
最
he
好
had the
的
natural
弓箭手。
inclination for that focus.
所
And
以
how would you
他就是
know
有一
that you
个
are
自
good at
然
something?
的倾向对此。
You practice
你怎么
how
会
many
知道
hours
你
usually
擅
to
长一个
master
东西呢？
something?
你要练习多长时间，让
Yes,
你才能掌握一件事
10,000
情呢？
hours. How
1万
many
小
days
时
is that?
那是多少
No,
天呢？
400. Say 440
400
days.
天，
It takes
440天
of
大概这样子。
diligent, continuous practice to
他需
master
要
something.
持续的勤
So
奋
what
的
he knew,
练习
Arjuna,
来
is
掌
that
握
he
某个
wanted
东
to
西。
become
所
proficient
以他
at
知道
bow and
他想
arrow.
要成为
So what it
非常
means is that he
的
has to
擅长
mold
于弓
himself
箭，
such
意思是
that that becomes
他要让自
his
己铸
reality.
造成，把要铸造自己，让
And the
他成为这个，
litmus
让
test
这
for
些成为
him
他的实
was,
相。
if I can find the
那么这个
aim in the dark,
意见分晓的实验
then I'll
方法
know.
是怎样的呢？就是如果我能在黑暗中也能找到那个目标，
So he
那我就知
picked
道我
up
成
the
了。
bow and the arrow. Do you
所以他
think he
捡起了
hit the
弓箭，
target the first
你认
time,
为他第
the
一次就
second
射中那个
time,
目标的
the
吗？
fifth
第二
hundredth
次呢？
time? No.
第500次呢？没有啊
Thousands of times he had to shoot.
好几千
the
次
arrow，
他需要射他的
And
弓
he's
箭。
also called what?
然
Gudukesha,
后
which
他也被
means the
称
one
为什
who
么
has
呢
sacrificed
？Gudukesha，意思
sleep.
是他牺
Where's
牲了
mastered
睡
sleep?
眠的那个人。他是掌
So
顺
imagine
延
such a
的。
person.
所以想象一下
Such
这
a
样的一
person
个
has
人，
come to this war field
他到
and
了
is
这个战
now
场
ready to start the real
上，
spiritual
然
journey.
后他现在开始准备他真正的灵性旅程了。
And in order to become a yogi, you have to
为
see
了成为一位瑜伽
that you
士
are a，
你需
bhogi.
要能够看到，你能够明白你是一个
So the
bhogi。
next word is bhoga.
下一个词是
It's
bhoga，
not there.
是反义词。
Not yet.
在
The
单篇
next
上还
word
没出
is
现。
bhoga.
下一个词是
B-H-O-G-A.
bhoga，bhoga。bhoga。
The classic definition of bhoga means
bhoga
to
这个词的传统
enjoy
定义意思是
from
享
a
受，
material source.
从物
So that
质
material
的
source is
源
interchangeable.
头，从物质
It can
的
be a
东西
job,
里
it
面
can
享
be a
受。
wife, it can
那
be a
么都可
husband, it can
以
be
是
a
可替换
house,
的
it can
丈
be a
夫、妻
car, it
子、
can be a
房子、车、好的
relationship,
工
it can be
作，一段
a
恋爱的关
holiday, it
系，
can be whatever you can
假
imagine in the
期，
material.
任何
This is
你可以在物质世界中想象
Enjoyment
到
is
的，
called bhoga
这种享乐被
because
称
it
为
has to
bhoga，
do with the satisfaction of our
因为它是
senses
与你的感官
so
满
we
足相关
engage
的。
our senses to get
我
pleasure.
们让我们的感官参与到其中，然后
At
获
the
得
end,
满
it's
足
just
快乐。
about
在最后，它
you.
只是关于与你相关，
And often at the
而且常
cost
常
of others.
是以他人
So there are many
为代价
industries
的。
that show this.
所以有好多
For
工业
example,
给我们展示出
the
了这一
chocolate
点，比如
industry.
说巧克力工业。
Who likes chocolate?
谁喜欢吃巧克力呀？
Did you know
你知道
you will
吗？
not eat chocolate after this?
等我讲完，
Did
你再也
you
不会想吃
know?
巧克力了。你知道吗？
Still till today,
一直到
about
今天，
40% of chocolate is obtained through slave
40%的
labor.
巧克力是通过
What does it mean, slave
奴
labor?
役
It
获
means
得
that
的。
the
奴役意味着什么呢？意思
person is
是
not paid.
工作的那个人他是没有收到报酬的。
So not only underage slave labor.
不光是普通的奴役，还有包括未成年的奴役。
For whose pleasure?
为了谁的快乐和满足
For
呢？
whose?
谁的？
For the satisfaction of taste.
为了
Because I learned what chocolate tastes
味
like.
觉的满足。因
And for
为
me, the cost is
知道巧克力
only
是什
how
么味
many
道。
euros in a
对我
shop?
来讲，它也就商店中卖几个欧元呢，
4 or 3, it depends.
3、4个欧元。
And the more the story of the chocolate,
那个巧克力的
Swiss
故事
chocolate,
越是动人，比如说瑞士巧克
very
力，
fancy.
就是级
So
别
we
就越
buy
高了。
the story
我们
without
只是
really
买的就是
knowing
它的那个
the
故事，
story or the
而我们
cost.
却并不知道背后的那个故事，
And it's the
背
same
后的那个
about
代价
so。many things.
有很多东西都是这样的。
So bhoga,
所以
35
bhoga 这个词
definitions, each linked
有
to a
35个定义，
different tradition,
每个都
spiritual
是
tradition in
与不同
India,
的传统灵性、
All
印
of
度的灵性
them
传统相关的，
are to do
所以
with
他们所有
pleasure,
都是与
with obtaining
快乐
pleasure,
满足相关的。
except in one
获得快
tradition.
乐，除了一个传
In the
统，
Vaishnava tradition,
在外省马
bhoga
传统当中
is the food
bhoga
offered for the pleasure
是
of the Lord.
是为了上主的快乐而献给他的食物。
In every other tradition, it's what
在
gives
其他
pleasure
所有的
to
传统中，
us,
它都是给我
what
们
leads
带
to
来满
our
足快乐的。
satisfaction, regardless of
导致
how
我们的
temporary
满
that
足
satisfaction
而
is. Bhoga also means suffering.
不管那个满足
Why
有多
does
短
bhoga
暂，所以
also mean
bhoga
suffering?
又意味着痛苦。为什么 bhoga 又
Speak
意味
loudly.
着痛苦呢？大声说。
After chocolate, you have this sugar is pushing you up.
Yeah,
And 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, down. You need more.
yeah. Why else? Huh? Loudly? Limited
大声说。
happiness.
有
So the
限的
happiness
快
is
乐，所以那
limited.
个快乐是有
And
限
usually
的，
what?
而且常常
And
是怎
usually
样
you
的呢？
want, as you said, more?
而且常常
At
你
what
想要更多，
price does
以
it
什么价
matter?
格呢？
The price
没
doesn't
没
matter as long
不
as
管价
I
格，
am that
只
this
要
is bhoga.
我获得了满
I
足，
will
这就是
do
bhoga。
everything I need to
我
do to
会
satisfy
做
my
所有一
thirst.
切来满足
Yes
我对他的渴望。
Loudly.
Also because you think that
请大声说，
but most of the time they are not really healthy for us. So it's also at the same
Desire has nothing to do with health.
欲
You will not willingly drink green juice.
欲望与
Exactly
那些健康
Exactly
没有什么关系，你是不
Right,
愿
so
意
let's do a
喝
little
那些
bit of
青汁、
science.
青草汁的。
So in science,
我们来
there
做一
is
点
in
点的科学
neurology
研究。
something called
就是在神经学
neuroplasticity.
中有一个被称为神经重
Neuroplasticity.
塑
So it
学
goes
的
together with
东
a
西
few。things. So
它们是由几件
in
东西联合在
neuroplasticity,
一
what
起
it
的。
basically speaks about
在
is
神
how
经
your
重塑
brain
学中
molds
说的是
itself
你
into
的
the habits
头、
that you
你的
keep,
大脑如
and how
何
that in turn
通过
creates
你
your
维持的习
physical
惯来
experience.
铸造你的大
So
脑，
an easy
然后它
example
再反
is
过来
like a
影响
reward
你的身
system,
体的体验。
like the
一
reward
个
system
很
when
简单
training
的
a
例子
dog.
就是
So there are
奖
two
赏机
kinds
制。
of
当我们
rewards you
训练
can
狗
give
狗的
when
时候
training a dog in
你
classical
可以
dog training. One is
在传统的
affection,
训练狗狗体系
and the other
中
one
有
is
两个奖赏，另一个是
treat.
表达对它的喜爱感情，另一个是给它吃东西。
So for people who are smart, they don't use
那
the
些聪明的人，他们
treat.
是不会用那个
They
吃东
use
西来训练狗狗的，
affection.
他们会
Because
用
then
一
the
种感
dog
情和
becomes
喜爱，
completely
然后那个狗狗
focused
变得
on the
完完全全
owner
的聚焦
and
在它
does
的主
whatever
人
the
上了。
owner with the reward of
无论那
affection,
个它的奖赏
right?
是怎
So
样，
what
就是那
happens
个
to the
喜爱的奖
dog's
赏是怎样
brain
的。
every time the
那么
owner
狗
gives
狗的头脑
affection?
发生什么呢？当主人
So
表达
there's
对
a
它的喜
rush
爱的
of
时候，
hormones,
就会
right?
有荷尔
There's two
蒙的一个飙
hormones,
升在发生。
dopamine and
有两种荷尔蒙，一个是
serotonin.
多巴胺，一个是
So
血
the
清素。
dog's brain is flooded with
所以狗狗的
serotonin.
头脑
And
就
it
充
figures
满
out
了
that if I do
血清
this,
素，它能
I
够
will not,
明
it's
白
not
说
about the
如果我
reward,
这么
it's
做，
about the feeling that the
这不是
reward
关于
gives. It's about the
它的奖
serotonin.
赏，而是关于那
So
个
if
奖
I do
赏
this,
带给它
I
的
will
感受，
get
关于
that.
它的血清素。
So
如
the
果我做了这个，我
brain
会获得那
shape
个。
of the
所以
dog
头脑
changes so that it
那
can
个狗狗
have
的大脑
the
就
feeling that
被
it wants
塑
to
造成
have.
它能
It
够
can have
获
the
得
rush
它
of
想要的感受，
serotonin.
它能够获得血
So
清
the
素
same
飙
for
升的
us,
那种
yeah?
感受。对我们来讲也是一样的，
So the same for us. What do we
对我们来
do?
讲也是一样的。我
We
们怎么做
learn
呢？
when we are
我
really
们学
young
习
how
当
to
我们非
get
常
the
年幼的
attention
时
that
候，
we need.
如何
If
获
we
得
are
我们想
hungry,
要的
a
关注。
child has 3
如果我们
different
饿的时
cries.
候，孩子
One
有3
cry
种不
is
同
for
的
milk.
哭泣，
One
一
cry
个
is
是要
for
喝奶，
comfort,
一
and one
个
cry is
是
for
要
change me.
别人安慰他，另一个是要换尿布。
The mother, if she's smart, figures
如
out
果妈妈够聪
these
明的
3
话，她能
cries.
够
But
分
most
辨出
mothers
来这
don't
3种不同的哭喊
figure it，
但大
out.
部分妈妈是分辨不出来的。
And so what happens to them is like, oh my God, what do you
发生
want?
什
I
么
don't
事？
know
哦
what
天
you
哪，你
want.
到底想要什么呀？你到底想要什么呀？我也不知道你要什么呀。
And so in our bhogic lifestyle,
所以
what we are
在我
seeking
们
evermore
bhogic
is
的生
how
活
to
方式
fill
中，
the
我们一直
hole.
追寻的是填我
We
们
are
的那
in
个
the
洞。
desert. It
我们
is
在沙漠当
covered
中，
in sand. The
覆
sand
盖
is
了
made of
沙子，
diamonds.
沙子是
And we are
钻石做
seeking
的。
water.
我们在追寻水，
But there is no water to have.
然后那里没有水。
This is what it's like out there.
就是这个样子。
Everybody is looking for the
每个
same
人都
thing.
在寻找同样的东西。
And we look in some really interesting places.
我们去某
We
一些
do
非常有
some
趣的地方
really
来找，
interesting things.
我们做一些非常有趣的事情，
And each of them is relevant and valid for
每个
us.
都是与我们相关的。
But life is pushing us
但是生
Our
活
life
在
is
催促着
pushing
我
us
们，我们的
towards
生活在催
something
促着我
more,
们
something
朝着
infinite.
某种
Life is
无限
giving
的
us the
东西。
chance to apply
生活给
devotion
了我们
where there will
一
be
个机会，
reciprocation.
能够
Imagine
来运用
the
我们
pressure we
的奉
place
爱。
on people in our lives.
而这是能够互动的。
Usually we
想象一
enter
下
relationships, loving relationships,
想象一下我们给别人带来的压力。
when we
当我们
reach
进入一
about
段恋爱关系的时候，
18 to 20, right?
当我
we
们
start.
差不多18、20岁的时候就开始
And what are
了。
the things that we've been informed that person should be?
我
How
们
do I
被别人告
live
知说，
without you?
那个对方应该是什么
How
样
do
子
I
的，就是
breathe
没有
without you?
没有你我该怎么
How
活
will I
呀？
ever
没有你我
survive?
该怎么呼吸呀？
That is a
我
lot
该怎
of
么活下去
pressure
呀？这可是好多压力呀！
to put on yourself and someone else.
放在你自
And
己身
yet
上，也放在对方的身上。
99.9% of us know
然
it's
后
not true.
99.9%的人，
We
其实
get what
我
we
们都知道
can
不是这
get
样
while
的。
we can
我们能
get
够
it.
获得我们想要获得的，在该获得的时候获得我们想要获得
But
的。
the thirst stays.
但是那种渴
The
的感
yearning
觉还是在那里。
for something more stays. And it gets bigger
然后那种渴望
and
还是
bigger.
在那里，然后变得越来越大。
So it
越来
doesn't
越
matter
大
how much we consume.
所以无论我们消耗
We
多
always
少，
want to have
我们
more
一直想要更多。
And the more we have, the more we
我
want.
们拥有的更多，就想要
And
更
it's
多。
just I, me, mine.
这就是我的。
And we think you should make me
我
happy.
们
This
还认为
should
你
make
应该
me
让我
happy.
快乐，这个东西应该让我快乐，
Should make me
这
happy.
个东西应该让我快乐。
I watched an interesting program as I was doing
我
the
看了一个，我
back
在准
work
备
for
这
this
个
talk.
讲
It
座
came
的时
across me
候，
this
我看到有趣的节目，
program
就碰巧看到了这个
on
电
I
视
think
节
I
目。
found it on Facebook
我
called
记得好像在脸书上看到
Hooked
的，
to the Look,
名字叫做 Hooked
which
to
is
the
about a
Look，
group
就是
of
被那个
people
样貌而着迷，
that
是
belong
一群人
to，a community
他们是属于
that
一个社群，
spend millions of dollars
他们花
on
好
plastic
几百万、
surgery.
好几百万的美金来
It's like a
做整
cultural
容手术，
thing. They
就
have
像一个文
clubs
化的东西一样。
and they
他们有俱乐
compare what
部
they've done.
他们互相还比较
And
他
it's
们所做的
amazing
那
to
些手
see
术，
the validation
真
that
是令人
people
惊讶，
get,
能
the
够看
attention
到
that they get, and that
他们获得
all
的
that we are really
肯定，
looking
获
for
得的
is
关
that
注。
love.
他们
And
所
so
寻
we'll
找的
use
就是
what
那
we
个爱。
have while
我
we
们
have
我们
it.
用我们所拥有的东西，当我们还拥有它
So
的时
while I
候，
don't know
来做这
how
些事
to
情。
become a yogi, what am I going to do?
但我不知道如何成为一位
I'm
瑜伽
going
师
to
的时候，我
use
该
what
怎
I
么办
have.
呢？我会用
I've
我
spent years
所
at
拥有的
school.
东西。我上学好多年，
And so in this line, I discovered this very
在这
interesting
个节目
story. So this is
我
a
发现了这个很有趣的
handbag.
故事。这是一个
It's
包包
called，a Himalaya.
名字叫喜马拉雅。
I will not say by which company it's made
我不会说是哪个公司的
because
产
we're in
品，
Germany and I may get into trouble.
因为我们在德国。我说的话我会惹麻烦
It
的。
doesn't expand. I want this to expand on the screen. How do I do it?
我想要把这张幻灯片在屏幕上放大，我该怎么做呀？
So the Himalaya handbag is made
所以喜马
of
拉雅包包
albino alligator
它是由那
leather.
个白化病的短吻鳄的皮做的。
The company that makes this bag
做这
only
个包包
makes
的那个公司呢，
12,000 bags every year.
它每年只做12000个，
All the bags are sold
所
before
有这
they're
些包包
made.
都是在卖
The rule of
在
the
做之前
company
都已
is
经卖
that
光了。
you
他们的规
can
则
only
是说，
purchase
你
one bag a year.
一年你只
And
能
it
买
doesn't
一
matter
个
where
这
you
样
go
的
on
包包。
holiday, if there's a
不
store
管
there,
你去哪里度
you
假，
can
那里
try
有个
to
商
buy another
店，
one, but
然后你
you
可以试着来
cannot.
买的话，但是你
The
是买不
company
到的。
never has
那个
sales.
公司
The price
从来
of
不
the
打折， 他们的
whatever it
那
is that they
个价
sell is
格，
never
他
reduced.
们的价格永远不
So
降价
what
的。
must you do to get this bag?
你应该怎样来获得这个包包呢？如果你想要的话，
No, what must you do? I mean, it's the whole
不是
story.
的，
It's not as
你
easy
该
as
做，这
prepaid.
是一个完
Do
整的
you
故事，
have
不是这么简单，
379,000
什么预付啊之类的。
thousand No, what must you do? How must you be to have this bag? No, besides rich. Rich is not.
有这个包，不是说有钱哦，
Come
是有钱。
We are talking. You must be hungry.
你一定是
You must be hungry.
很饥饿。
You must be smart. You must be invested in this story. You must have knowledge about it. How would you even know about a bag like this? For many of you, it's the first time you're seeing it.
你们中很多人都是第一次看到这个包包，对不对？否则的话，
So
你们怎么
first
知
you
道
have
这
to
样的
have
包包呢？
knowledge.
你需要有
Then you have
知
to have the
识，
gap inside you that
然
says
后
this bag is
你
going to
中
fill
间
that
就
gap.
是有一个缺口，然后这个包包能够填上这个缺口，
And then you have to spend. There's a woman
然
who
后
has
你要花钱。有一位
in
女
the
士
same from the same company bags to the
要
value
有
of
这个
2
同样的
million
公司的包
pounds.
包，有超过200万英镑的包包都是来自这个公司的。
Understand? My happiness,
明白吗？
I
我的快乐
am renting happiness from this
我是
bag.
从这个包包租来了一些快乐，
I am renting happiness from my Lamborghini.
从我的兰博基尼租了
I
一些
am
快乐
renting
来，
happiness from my house,
从我的房子租了一些快
from my
乐，
family.
从我的家庭。
And renting means I have to
租
pay.
的意思是
Paying
我
means I
要
have
付
to
款的，
Work.
付款的意思是
Working
我需要
means there is
工
going to
作，
be a
工作意思
consequence.
是有后果的。
So I am like a wee rat on a wheel.
我们就像在一个轮子上的老鼠一样，
For I,
就是为了我
I,
我
me, mine.
我的，
Comprende?
明白吗？
So in my desire to quench my thirst,
所以
I find
在
myself
我
in a
的
desert
止
of
渴的欲望
diamonds
当中，
with a
我发现
handbag
我自
that I
己处
can't
在一
eat.
个钻石的沙漠当中，还带着一个没法吃的包包。
In the handbag.
在那个包包里吗？
With no guarantee of water.
我们不保证有水哦。
So this is what we are at our maximum in the
这
world.
就是我们在世界上最大的
We
可
have
能性就是这样了。
everything that can buy, no, not buy,
我们能
rent
够
temporary
拥有
happiness.
所有
We have
能够
everything.
租借到的短暂的快乐的所有一切。
We can go where we want,
我
eat
们能够
what
去
we
到任何
want,
我们想去的地
touch
方，
what
吃
we
任何
want,
想吃的东西，
smell what
触
we
摸任何
want,
我们想触摸的东西，嗅任何我们想闻的东
feel
西，
what we want.
感受我们任何想感受的。
But it doesn't last long.
但是它不会持续长久。
And so in the search for that
所
serotonin
以在
hit,
追寻
we have to do
那个
something
血清素飙
more
升的
extreme.
状况里，我们需要做一些更极端的
So
事
we
情。
ski and we bungee jump and we
我们
swim
滑
and we
雪，
all kind
然
of
后
white people stuff.
去
We
蹦
do.
极、游泳，各种那些白
We
人要
risk
做的
our
各种活动。
lives to feel
我
something.
们用生命来冒险，来感受到一些什么东西。
We risk often our mental health to feel
常常是
something.
我们的精神的状态来冒险，来感受到一些什么东西。精神
I
的
have a
健康
friend
来冒险。我有一位朋友，
Who has a handbag story.
他也有一个包包的故事。
She for a long time was obsessed with Louis Vuitton.
她是一位女士，她有很
She's
长
one
一
of
段
the
时间都
brightest
对路易
people
威
that I
登
know.
非常的
We were
着迷。
born in the
她是我
same
认
really
得
small
最
town.
聪明的
in a
人，
really
我
small
们出生于同一个
community.
小镇，
And what
非
that
常
usually
小的
means
街
is that
区
we don't aim
也
big.
常常意味着我们没有什么很大的目
But
标。
since I can remember her, her
但
aim
是
was
从我
always
记
to
得她
make
起，
some
她的
kind
目
of
标一直是要做
difference.
出某种不同。
More so in her own life. She didn't want
尤
her
其如
story
此
to
是她的
be
生活，
everybody
她
else's
不想
story.
要她的
So
故
she
事和别
knew
人的
what
故
the
事都是一样
foundation
的，
is,
所以
and she wanted to
她知道
do
那个基础
more.
是怎样的，
And so she
她想要做
learned
更多。
about Louis
所以后
Vuitton.
来她知道了路易威登这个包包，
And then she decided,
然后
even
她
though
就
she
决
has
定
a
说，
husband who has
哪怕
money,
她有一个丈
she doesn't
夫
want to do
还
it
蛮
like
有钱
that.
的，
She wants to give herself that handbag from her own effort.
通过自己的努力来获得
So she
这
did
个包
some
包。
research to find out how
所
she
以她
can
研究
make
了一下，
a
来看
constant
看
flow of
她如何
income.
能够有一个
And so she
源
joined
源不断的收
like a
入。然
retail
后她就
direct
参加了
sales
一个零售，是
marketing
直
company
售，
that
是
sells jewelry.
市场公司的一个直售，他们是卖珠宝的。
And so for about 8 months, she was the best salesperson in her
大概
region
8
and
个
then in the
月，她一直
country.
是在她这个地区
And as a
销售冠军
result,
之后是
she
全国
then
的销
had
售冠
enough
军。
money
结果
to
呢，
buy
然后她就有了足够的
that Louis
钱
Vuitton bag.
来买那只路易威登的包
So
包。
she had it. And the feeling of
所以她
accomplishment
买到了。
that came from it was
所以
visible on her
从那
Instagram,
里
her Facebook,
带来的那种满
it
足
was
的感
everywhere.
受，在她所有的媒体平台上都能看到，到处都是。
And so as a result of this, she knew
然
now,
后
because she's
结
smart,
果她现在知
I
道，
have to
因为她很
insure
聪
this
明，
bag.
她知道我想要给这个包包上个保险。
And so she decided on the day that they were
然后
going
她决
to
定
go. So
那
the
天他
nearest
们
really
是
big
要
town is Durban, which is about
最
3.5
近的大
hours away.
镇大概是3个半小
So
时以
she
外的
wanted
一个
to
叫 Durban 的
surprise
地
her
方。
family.
然后她
And
想
so
要给家
she,
人一
with the
个
rest
惊
of the
喜。
money, managed to get
她用剩下
the
的
possibility
钱
to take
让他
her
们
whole family to
能够
Mauritius for holiday.
带整个家庭去毛里求斯度个
So
假。
there were some things to wrap up. She wanted to do some
然后他们
shopping.
要准备
She
一些
wanted
东
to.
西，
So
他
her
们要去购物。
children had never had passports before,
因
so
为他
she
的孩
applied
子
for
还没
those.
有护
Then she
照，
wanted to
所以
get
他要
them
申
new
请护照。
clothes to
然后给他
enjoy
们买一
on
些
their
新衣
holiday.
服，让他们能
And so
够
all of these
回来的
things
时候
she
很开心。
planned.
所有他计划的这些
And
东
now
西，
she was going to go shopping in a
然后他
shopping
要
mall
去
in
购物，
Durban.
在一个 Durban
She
的
had
商
her
场。
Louis Vuitton handbag and
她拿
her
着她的那个
appointment
Louis
to
Vuitton 的包包。
insure it on the
然
same
后他
day,
与那个
just
保
next to
险
the
的
clothing
约
shop that she
约的
was
时
in.
间，也是那一天，就是在
So she
那个
enters
衣服
the
店的隔
shop
壁，
and
就在那个
she
做保
was
险的地
putting
方。
shoes
她
on
进入
her
了衣服
youngest
店，
son
然后他就给他的
and
小
put
孩
her
子穿
bag
鞋，
down on the
把他的包
floor.
包放在
And
地
then the
上，
movie starts.
然后电影就开场了。
So as she was distracted, her husband was nearby.
当
She has
她
4 kids.
丈夫
And
在
the
那
other 3
还有
children
4
were
个孩子，丈
choosing
夫
the
在边
things that
上，
they
另外
want
2
in
个
the
孩子在选
store.
他们自己东西，他的注意力
A
被分
person
散的时候
entered.
呢，有一个
They
人
saw
走进了
afterwards
商
on
店，
the
他们之后
security
才看
footage.
到的，是
A
从那
person,
个
a
安保
woman
录像上面
entered
看到的。
and
有一
stood
个女
next
士，
to
她走了
her.
进来，
And
然后站在
another
她边
woman
上。
stood just a little
另外
further away.
有一位女士
She
离着远一
then
点站在那，
kicked the bag
然后她就
to that
那个女士
woman
踢了一下她那个包，把那个踢到另外一
who
个女
picked
的
it
那
up.
边去了。另外一个女
Now,
士把它捡起来
inside of the
了，
bag is their
然后在她那个
passports,
包里呢，
the
他们的护
money that
照
they were going to spend while they were
他
on
们
holiday, the
度
car
假的时候要
keys,
花的
their house
钱
keys,
车钥匙、
everything
房
is
子钥
inside
匙，所有一
of this
切都在
bag.
她那个包里面。
Her rented happiness
她
is
租来的快乐
inside of this
就
bag.
在这个包
So when
里
she
头。
was done tying the laces on her son's shoe,
所以她就给
and she
儿
gets
子
up, she
绑上
reaches
鞋带
for
的
the
时候，
bag,
她站起来
and it's
想要
not
去拿
there.
她的包，包不在那儿了。
So the same bag that gave her that
就是
much
这只包
happiness now
给
gives
她
her
带来那
what?
么多快乐的包，现在那么多快乐的那个包包，现在给她带
So
来了什
much
么呢？
misery,
这么多的痛苦、
panic,
恐慌、
fear.
恐惧。
Her stomach dropped
就是
to her
她
feet.
就是她那个形容词是她的胃都吓到了，掉到脚那里，她是无比的恐慌。
As she made all the calculations in her head,
她开
what to
始
do
脑
now?
子里
Because
在
she can't even
做
get
做
into
所有一
her
切，因为该怎么
car.
做？因为实际上她都进不了她的车。
The bag was never recovered.
那个包包就后来就再也没找到，没找回来。
But what she learned was that
然后
my
她所
happiness
学
is
从
not
中学到
dependent.
的是，我的快乐不是有条件的。
We had a conversation after, and I've
我
spoken
们之后有一
about
个对
similar
话，
topics to her before. It didn't
在
make
之前我
sense
跟
to
她
her
有聊
until
过
that happened.
相似的主题，直到那一个事情发生后，对她来讲这些才有意
And so
义。
in our lives, the challenges don't
所以在我
change.
们的生活中，我们
They're
的挑战
supposed
并
to
不
be
会改
there.
变，他们就是应该在那里的。
Nobody says that as a
没有
devotee you
人说
cannot
过，
own
作为奉献者，
a
你不应该拥有一个379261美金的包包，没有人说过。
But the bag
但
should
是
not
那个
own
包包
you.
不应该拥有你，
You should not rent your happiness
你不应该
from
租
anything.
把你的快乐从任何东西上面租来。
How?
你的快乐该怎么做呢？
How? So as much effort as you've made to become aware that this
这么多的
bag
努力，能够
exists,
意识到这个包包它的
and
存
as
在，
much effort as you make
正如你做了
to
很大的
acquire,
努力，能够
to
寻
maintain,
求
to
来
sustain,
维持，
what is
来持
required
续的
is
所需要的是什么呢？
knowledge.
知识。
Who steers you in
谁
the
在为你
direction
掌
of
舵？
any material
朝
object?
着任何物质的目标
How
的方
does
向呢？
something become so valuable and important only because we
那些如
have
此有价值的
knowledge
那些东西，如何
and we
那
are
些
in
东西怎么
or
会变得如
seek
此
the
有价值呢？
association
这么重要
of
呢？
others? We want
只
to
是因为
be
我们有
in
知识，我们
the
寻求
golden
与他们的
circle.
连结，我们想要处在那个黄
And so
金
we
圈圈
work
最重要的那个圈圈里，所以
We
我们
work at
努
that
力，
bogic
我们
devotion.
朝着那个 bogic 的那种奉爱物质
We
的
do
满
the
足的奉
puja
爱的方向而努力。
Focusing our minds
我们要做那个
We
把
place
我们头脑
ourselves
聚焦的普及，
where we
我
think
们把我们自己
will
放
bring
在
us what
我
we
们
need
认为会给我们带来我们
to
所
be
需要的那些位置上
happy. But running
会
in
给我
the
们带来快
background
乐
is
的。
always
然后
the
在
knowledge
后台
that
一
it
直
will
是
only
有那
give
个
me
知识在运作，
temporary
它只会带给我短暂的
99.9% of us
快
know
乐。
that.
我们中
This will only
99.9% 的
give
人
me
都知道，
temporary
这只会
happiness.
给我带来
That
短暂
serotonin
的快
rush is
乐。
not going to last
那
for
个
long. It doesn't make
血清
sense.
素的飙升是不会持续长久的，
And
这
so
是
we
没有
must
意义的，讲不通的
get。back on the
所
wheel.
以我们必须回到我们的轮子上来。
In his conversation with Arjuna, Krishna explains
在他与
again and again
阿朱那的对话
what
当
we
中
ought
，Krishna
to
再
and
一
what
次
we ought
再
not to
一次又一次的解释我们该做什么，我们不该做什么。
think and feel
我们
in
想
order to
感
attain an
受，
awareness of
为
steady,
了
a
能
steady
够真
awareness
达
of joy.
一个稳定的快乐。
So we don't want to be drug addicts, which is all
我们
that a
不想要成为
serotonin
瘾
high
君子，
is.
那些都
You
是
get
血
hit
清素的飙升、
Then you go
高潮，
down.
然后你又往下降，
And then you have to get hit again. And so
然后
how
你
many
要让
actions
它飙
must be
升，
made
你要做多少的
to
努力
live
呢？
that
行为呢？
consumerist lifestyle?
要
You have
以
to
这
find
种
the
消费主义的
objects
方式来生活呢？你要找到那
Millions
个
of
目
them
标，
that are going to bring you
数以百
up,
万的，
and then
能
you
够把你往
know they will bring you
飙升的感受
down
往上带，然后你同时也
Clear？
知道他们会让你往下掉。大家清楚
So
吗？
it's a roller coaster.
这就像个过山车一样。
So we have the choice of
我们
renting
有这个
happiness
选择
or
是租
being
一些
happy.
快乐，还是成为快乐？
We have the choice of renting happiness
我们
or
是拥有这
being
个选
happy.
择，是租一些
So
快
in
乐，
his
还是成为快
dissertation,
乐？
and Patanjali speaks about
在博
something
坦加
called
利的那个
pratyahara
理论当中，他说到了这个
pratyahara means
pratyahara，
to withdraw the
这个意
senses
思是
inside of
是
the
指
body.
把感官收束进入身体
So what
内
we've
部。
seen for 400 generations
我们
is
看到了
people
400个
seeking
世代，我们
validation,
在追寻
fulfillment, happiness
这肯定
outside.
圆满
What
以
we've
及来自于
seen
外在
is
的
that it
快乐。
ends in a heap
我
of
们看到
ash.
的是，最后变
And
成了
that
一堆
of
灰
those
烬。
people, the only ones that
所
are
有这些
remembered
人，
are the ones who make an
唯
effort
一能够令人
opposite
记得的 是
to seeking
做出
their
努
own
力的，
satisfaction.
是与追寻让自己的满足
Vis-a-vis
正好相反的那些人，也就是那些圣人。
So in Pratyahara, which is what Guruji is teaching us about as well,
Guruji 也教导过我们
is that the thing you seek
你
resides
追求的
inside of
那些
you.
那个东西是居于你之内的，
It must reside inside of you because
它
you
一
are
定是居于你
alive.
之内的，因为你是活生生
So
的
what is animating
有
you
生命的，
is a portion
是那些让
of
你
that
有生命
supreme
的，是
reality.
那个至高实相的一小部分。
This also
一小片。
means that
这也意味着
happiness, joy, bliss,
那种
whatever
快
it
乐、
is,
喜悦、
is
极喜
also
等等，无论是什
residing
么，
inside of
它
you.
也是居于你之内的。
But you've made the mistake, I've made the
但是你
mistake
犯了一个
of
错，
looking
我
for
犯了一个
that
错，
somewhere else.
我们去其他地方找
So a
神了，
material thing has become
所以
the
物质
object
的
of
事
my
情
devotion.
就成为我
I
所
have
致力于
given the
的那
highest
些的目标。
importance
我
to
把
something
我把
other
它最
than
重
what
要
is
的，
seated
我把
inside
这
of
些事
me.
情认为是最重要的，而不是那居于我
And so
之
I
内
go
的。
from unfulfillment
所
to
以我就从
unfulfillment.
无法圆满
Simply because I
去
don't
到
have
无
the
法圆满，
knowledge.
只是因为我没有知识。
And so as we are the product of 400 generations,
我们
Imagine
作为400个世代的产
400
品，想
generations
象一
of
下，
humans
有
produced us.
400代的人类，最后
And
产
in
生了
the
我们。
8 billion people present on this planet,
在现在地球上的80亿人
we
类
have
当
the
中，
chance to
我们
interact
能
with
够拥
somebody
有这
that
个
says
机
to
会，
us, if you come
与
to
那
me,
个对我们
and you
说，
really
如
want
果
God,
你到我这里
the
来，
operative
并且你
is
真的想要
really
神的，那个
sincerely,
重要的关
I
键
can
是
give him to you.
真正的、真诚的，我可以把它给你的这样的一个人
This
进
is
行
the
互动。
position that we stand in.
这是我们所处的位置。
So what he gives to us is the challenge. He says, okay,
他给了我们的
Your life
是
is the
挑
way that
战
it。is.
他说，
because
你的生
it's
活
like
就
that.
是那样的，因为它就是
You
那样
have
的。
what you have.
你拥有你所
Means the
拥有的，
dynamics,
意
whatever
思
has
是
happened in the
那个
past,
动态。
whatever your
无论过去
fears
发
are
生了
of the
什么，
future, you have it.
无论你对未来怎样的恐惧，你都是拥有的。
None of those things are guaranteed
没有任何东西
The
是被
past
保
is not
证的、
guaranteed
被承诺的。
because you may
过去
remember
没有
it
被
only
保证，
from your
也许
perspective.
你只是通过你
The
的角
future is
度
not
来记得这些
guaranteed.，
未来也
But
没有
in
被
this
承诺
present
或者保
moment,
证。
what you
但是
have
在现在这个当下的
is
时
the
刻，你所
possibility to
拥有
be
的
you.
是成为你的这样一个可能
And
性。
so if the well you've been digging is
所
in
以你一直
something
在挖那个口
material,
井，是在物质世界
the
当中
result
的，
is always going to be
那么结
dissatisfaction.
果一
And
直
that
就是
points
不会令人
you,
满意的。
because
就会
when we feel upset
一
and
直
pain, we feel it here.
只输给你看，我们
So
会
the
感觉到
attention is always to come
低落和痛苦，
here.
所以我们的关注一
And in
直是
his
要回到这里
description
胸口
to
这里。
Krishna, to Arjuna, Krishna tells him
Krishna
exactly
在
what he
对
needs to
阿朱那的
do.
描述中也说，他所需要做的事情，
He's taken the effort of seeking
他
to
努力
own,
追
seeking
寻，
for us to own,
为
by
我
saying it is
们
already with
追
you,
寻。
as I am already with you.
然后他说，
Now
他
you
已
know how
经
to
与你
look
同在，
for me where I
正
am.
如我已经与你同在。
And in
你现
doing
在知
so,
道
the
该去
highest
哪里
happiness
找寻我。
becomes possible.
这
Close
么
your
做
eyes.
的话，那么最高的快乐将成为可能性。请大家闭上眼睛。
It doesn't mean anything for me to tell you.
这并不意味着我
Guruji
要
is
告诉你。
continuously telling.
咕噜基持续的就在跟我们讲，
What matters is that there's something we can do.
他说，最关键的是我们可以
That we have breath.
做一些
We can become
事情
aware
是因
of
为
that breath.
我们有
Now
呼吸，
become
我
aware of
们
your
能够
breath.
觉知到那个呼
Straighten
吸。
your
现在
spine.
开始觉知你的呼吸，脊椎竖直，
Sit in a relaxed way.
以一个放松的姿势坐着，
Keep your concentration on your
把你的
third
关注
eye
点放在你的第三眼，
and gently breathe in
轻柔的吸气，
and gently breathe out.
轻柔的呼气。
Now add the
现在
mantra
把
that you
颂
chant to
歌
your breath.
加上你的呼吸一起唱。
If you have Atma Kriya, you can do
如
Japa
果你有阿
Kriya.
特玛克里亚瑜伽的话，你可以练习加帕克里亚。
Each breath. So
每一个呼
continuous
吸
awareness
持续的
with
保持
your
觉知，
breath,
觉知你的呼吸，
remembrance.
铭记。
All the boxes are ticked.
所有该做的都已经做了。
Take a very deep breath
深深的吸气，
and exhale.
呼气。
Now I want you to concentrate
现在我想要你专注
on that infinitesimally
专注在
small
一
point
个无
of
穷
light.
小的光点上。
So I'd like you not to move your body at all.
完
Do
全不要
not
移动你的身体
move，your body at all.
完全不
Become
要动你的身
very,
体，
very still.
变得非常非常的
Concentrate
静止，
your awareness
关注
on that
意
infinitesimally
识
small point of
在一
light
个
that
无穷小的
shines
光点上，
brighter than 1,000 suns.
它比1000
This
个
is
太
how
阳
the
还要
Atma
亮
is。described.
阿特玛就是被这样描述的。
Do not move your body.
不要移动你的身体，
Take a deep breath
深深的
and
吸气，
exhale, open your eyes.
呼气，然后睁开眼睛。
Is this easy to do?
这个做起来容易吗？
No.
不容易。
Did you see the infinitesimally small point of light that is the
你
Atma?
能够看到
No.
那个无穷小的那个光点吗？那是阿特玛，没有。
You can imagine it in your
可
mind.
以想象，
That doesn't mean that
用
you
在脑海中想象，
saw
意思
it.
并不是说你看到
And
它，
that's okay.
这没问题。
So rounds and rounds of japa every day you are
一轮的
doing
加帕，
You
每天
sit
你都在做。
with the beginning of discipline to perform your
从自律
kriya.
开始来练
You
习你
try
的
because
克
you
里亚
have knowledge of
你
it
尝试，
to do your
因为你有
puja.
知识，你要做
But
你的
what is
普济
running in your mind always is,
但是
I'm
在
not
你
really
头脑
sure if
中
this is
一直是有那种我
working.
不太确定，这能起作用。
How do I know if I'm doing the
我怎么
right
能知
thing?
道我做的是对的呢？
Right? Am I speaking truth?
我说的对吗？是的。
What we are going on is the feeling. By definition, the Guru,
通过定
Paranthapa
义
Sri Swami
，Guru
Vishwananda,
Paramhamsa
Krishna
Sri Swami
to
Vishwananda
us.
正如 Krishna，
Our lives are
我们的
like
Krishna， 我们
Kurukshetra.
的生活，我们的生命就像巨炉之战。
And for many of us still,
我们中很多人
the charioteer is me.
的战车
I am
译者
driving.
仍旧是我自己，我在驾驶着我的战
So
车。
the job of Arjuna is to shoot arrows, right?
所以阿朱那的工
And
作
they
是
must
射
find
弓
their
箭，
target.
他们一定要找
Imagine
到他们的
if
目标。
Arjuna had
想象一下，如果阿朱
steer the
那
chariot
是
and
需要掌控他的
shoot
战车，
arrows.
同时射
This
箭
is，what we attempt to do in our
这是我们
lives.
尝试要做的，在我们生活当中。
So when we enter the guru-disciple
所
relationship,
以我们进入了上师与
makes
弟
it
子的关系
possible
之后呢，
for us to have the knowledge and the
它
techniques
让我
to
们
obtain the
有可能获
happiness
得
that
知
we seek.
识，以及获得我们所
He
追
becomes
寻
the
的快乐
medium
的那些技
for
巧。
that
它成为
transformation.
那个中介，让这
And
些
he
转化
does
发生的中
everything
介。
to remind
他
us of
做所
that.
有一切来提醒我们这一些。
He can only do this because he's on the other side of
他
where
能
we
做
are.
这些，是因为他在我们的对面。
And so by focus and by discipline,
通过
and right
专注，
action,
通过自律以
we
及
can
正确的
obtain
行为，
grace.
我们
His grace.
能够获得恩典，他的恩典。
So I'd like to tell you a little bit of my story.
我想要跟大家
So I
讲一
was
讲，
born in a
讲一
very
点我的
small
小故事
town.。
我出生在一个非常
In
小
the
的
middle
小
of
镇。
nowhere. And from the time I was about 6, I had the strong
从我大概
yearning to
6 岁
feel the
开始，
presence
我
of
有一
God.
种很强烈的
It
渴
was
望，
so
就是要
clear
感受到神的
that I
灵在，
wanted to
如
feel
此
His
清晰
presence.。
我
Not
想要
that I
感受
want to
到他
see
的
him.
灵在，不是说我要看到他。
This is a very important defining
这
point
是
I
一
wanted
个
because
非
that
常
means
重
it's
要
an
的界定。
internal reality.
这意味着
And the
这是一种
request was
内在的
I
实
want
相
to。continuously
我
feel.
想要的是，我要持续的
I
感
don't want
受
a
到。
serotonin hit,
我不想要那种血清素的飙升。
right? And so I had this experience when I was
然
about
后
6 and a
我有
half.
这个体验，大概我
Where
6岁半的时候，我有了一次体验。
Later, when I was researching,
之后，
can
当我
only
在
be
查资料
described
的时候
as，
只能被描述为
Nirvikalpa
是
Samadhi.
Nirvika
where I became
三
aware
摩
of
地的
this.
状态。
The
然后，当
sound
我开
was
始
so
意识到
big
那个声音
and
如
so
此
vast. There was no
宏大，
light. It was just
如此广
darkness
博，
and
没有
sound.
光，只是黑暗以及声音。
And I could see myself
然后我能够看到我
3
自己。
times removed. I was
三
watching
段式
myself,
的
watch
在移动
myself, watch，
我在看我
myself.
自己，我在看我自己，我在看我自己。
And since that experience, everything
从那个体
inside
验
me
之后呢，
changed. And the
我之内
thrust
所
of
有一
my
切都改
life
变了。
became that I want to understand. And I
然后
want to feel
我
the
生
presence
命
of
的
God.
动力变得就是我想要理解，
And
并
so
且
after
能够
this,
感受到神
from
的
the
灵在。
people who I was growing up with and from my
这件事
family,
之
I
后，
became
从
a
我
bit
的
strange.
家人以及我熟人那个角度，他们觉得我开始变得有点奇怪了。
So it feels clearly different for me before this happened and
对我来
after this
讲，就
happened.
是这个发生
And so
之前
the
和之后对我来
trajectory
讲
that
是非
my
常
life
清晰
followed
的。
was I
然
was
后
always
我生命
looking
的轨
for
迹之后，就是
what
在
is
一
this
直在寻
relationship?
找
What does it mean?
这个关系
And so I
到底
would
意味着
read
什么。我会阅读
To，see how ancient people had relationships with
然
God.
后看一看古代的人是如何与
And what is
神
the feeling?
建立关系的，
And I remember
是怎
then
样的
6
感
years
受。
after this experience, I was
然
12.
后
I
这个体验
threatened
之后
God.
6年，我那时候12岁，我就威
And I
胁
said to him, You
神，
must,
我就跟他说
you：“ must
你一
reveal
定要
your presence to
揭
me.
示，把你的
You
灵
have
在
to do
揭
it.
示给我，你一定要这么做，
Show me. And I remember I was crying in my
给我
room.
看。”我记得我在我的房间哭泣。
And so time passes and the exploration
时间
became
流
more
逝，
big. It was so
那个
interesting
探索
that even though there was
非常
so,
有
I'm
趣的是，
sure,
哪怕
sure,
那个时候
there
我
were so
确
many
定
books available to
有
read.
好多书
But
可
I
以
never
读的，
found
但是
I never
我
found
从来
them.
没找到过那些书。
They never came into my life. When I was 16, I learned that the sound I
当
heard
我16 岁
when I
的
was
时候，
6
我
was
知道
Om.
我6岁的时候听到
I
那个声
didn't
音是
know
Om，
it before that.
在这个之前我都不知道。
And then my search became more.
然后
I was more
我的
desperate and
探
hungry
索
and
就变得
determined.
更加的不顾
So I
一切，
finished high school at about
更加的热
17,
切，以及
18.
下定决心。
And
17、18岁的时候，
the
我上完中学。
dream of most parents is that
大多数
they
父母的梦
send their
想就
children to
是
university
他们把孩子送
and then
去
they
大
enter
学，
some kind of
之
job
后
afterwards.
他们之后
As soon as I
有一份
turned
工作。
18, I became restless.
我18岁的时候，我就变
And
得
so I
非
did
常
the
的，一到
opposite.
18岁我就变得非常的焦躁不安。我
Without
做了
telling
正好
my
相反的
parents,
事
I
情，
left home.
没有告诉我的父母，我就离开了家。
You could say I ran away from.
你可以说我是逃出去的。
But what was interesting is that my mother
非
never
常有
searched
趣
for
的
me.
是，
My
我的
parents
母
didn't
亲从
search
来
for
没有
me.
找过我，我的父母从来没有找过我。
So 4 years later, when I went back
过
home,
了4年，当我回
I
家，
asked her. No, she said
我
to
就
me.
问我的妈
She
妈，
volunteered
是她
the information.
她主动跟我讲的。
She said that she doesn't know
她
why,
说，她不知道
but
为
she
什么，
knew that I wouldn't do
但是
anything
她
that
知
would
道
hurt
我
me,
不会做任
or
何
someone
伤
else.
害自己或伤害
and
他
that
人的事情
I。would be okay.
那
And so,
这样
in
我就没问
essence, my
题。
spiritual journey started then when I
所以
was
我的灵性
18.
旅程基本上就是大
I
致上
traveled
从18
all
岁
over
开始
South
的。
Africa.
我在南非到处旅行，
I wanted to know why can I not feel
我想
God's
要知
presence?
道为什么我无法
It
感
should
受
be
神
natural,
的灵在。
was in my
它应该
mind.
很自然呐、因为
I
我
should
脑海
feel.
中是这么觉得的，我应该能感受到。
And then something must be wrong with my
然后
mechanism.
一定是我的机械装置，身体的机械装置有
And
一些
so
不对劲的地方。
one after the other,
然后
my
一个
teachers came
有一
into
个
my
我
life. And so
的
they were all
教师出现在我
healing
的生活
teachers.
当
And
中，
what I
他
understood
们都
was,
是疗
okay,
愈教师
if I fix
我理
the
解的是，
mechanism of my
如果
body,
我把我的
then
身
I'll
体
be
的机
able
械
to
装置给修
perceive
好的话，
His
那么我
presence.
就能够感受到神的
I
灵在，
understood by then that there are
神的
so
存在
many
然后我就理
barriers
解
that
这里
stand
有
between
好多的
us and what we
障
want to
碍或者
experience.
屏障，它
And
在
so
我们和
consciously
我
we
们所
can
要
do
体验的
something.
中间，所
And
以
so I
意识上
did.
我们是可以做一些东西
But
的，
still
所以我就
not.
做了。但我仍旧没有感受
So from about 18to
到神的存
23,
在。
this
大概
intense
从18到
search.
23岁，有一个非常激烈
When I
的
was
探寻
23
的过
years
程。
old, I'd
当我
gained
23
enough
岁的时候，
knowledge to be able to
我获得
help
了足够的
others
知
with
识，
what was
能
happening
够
to them
帮助他
physically
人，
and to
就是
show
他们
the
身体
link
上
between the
发生的，
mental,
能够
the
展示出
emotional,
他
and the
们的
physical.
精神啊、情
And I
绪以
did
及
some
肉体上的
interesting
这
work.
些的关系。我做了一些非常有趣的事
So I
情。
walked into the office of the place I
我
was
走
working
进那
as
个
the
我工作的地方的那个办公
secretary
室，
was hearing
那个秘书
about the invitation to meet
能够
a young Mauritian saint.
听到有一个邀请，是一位毛里求斯的圣人要
And
去见一个毛里
The
求斯来
person
的
who
圣
was
人，
reading
然后在读这个
was
广告
had done a
的
workshop
人，
with a person who was the
他是
first
与那
organizer
个
for
最初
Guruji
的
in South
咕噜
Africa.
基的在南非
So I
的
said
组
to her,
织者
I really want to come to
办
that
过一个工作
with
坊
you.，
然后我就跟他说
She said,，
我真的
"Cool."
很想跟你一起去。他说很棒
And
啊，
he made it so obvious that he
他
was
就让他变得
steering
很
the
明显，
ship
就是
the
他
entire
在
time.
掌控着
Because the
整个
first
在所有时间，他就
darshan
在
that he
开着这
did in
艘
South
船，因为
Africa
在
was one of the
在南
first
非的第一次
public
达善
darshans that he'd ever done.
是他
So he was
是公
doing
祭的第一次
darshans,
的公
but they
开
were
达
in
善。
homes of
他们
people that were
有达
invited.
善，
This
但
was
是都
one
是
of
在
the
别人的家
first
里。
public
但
darshans that
是
he'd
这
done.
是最初的第一
And to
次
make
的
it
公开
more
达善。
amazing, he was giving
更令
darshan
惊
by
奇的
touching
是
the back and the
那
front
个
of
时
the
候，
head
他还
and
通过
embracing each
碰触别人
person
的
afterwards.
前额和后额来给达
Embracing
善，
each
之后还
person
拥抱人
afterwards.
们。达善之后还
And
拥
so
抱每
this
一个
ran
人。
for 3 days.
这个
So
大概有
every day I
3
would
天
go. I
持
was
续了3天，
amazed.
每天
So
我觉得非
when
常的
I
惊奇。
came into the room, it was
我到
full
那个
of
地方。
therapists Reiki people,
全都
yoga
是疗
people,
愈师、灵
rebirthing
气呀、
people.
瑜伽
They were all there because there were no devotees.
在重生
But
疗愈
these are
法
people
等
that are
等。那个时候
interested
还
in
没有奉
something
献者，
unusual.
但是
And
这
he
些
was
人
so
是对那些
unusual.
不同寻常事
And
情
so
感
we were
兴
all
趣的
there
人，
and we
因
were
为过
like,
去
I
非常
was
的不同寻
greeting
常，我
people
们都
and
在那儿，
then
所以
I
我
closed
们
my
互
eyes
相
and
问
he
候
was
啊，
3 hours
然后我
late.
就闭上
We
眼
waited
睛，
for 3
他就
hours.
迟了3个钟头，我
In
在那儿等了
Johannesburg.
3个钟头，在
So we
约翰内斯堡
waited.
我们等
And
着
he was in the venue. There
他
was
就在那个地点上了，
a round glass. It was
有
a
一个
two-way
软的
glass.
玻璃，
He was
是
on the
双
other
向
side
的一个
of the
玻璃，
glass
他在玻璃的
watching
另一边，
and
看着。
waiting. And then
等着。
some people left and some
然后有些
people were
人就离开
impatient.
了，
And after
我们
that,
不耐烦
I
了。
was sitting in the
然后
middle of the room. My
我
eyes
坐
were
在房间的
closed.
中间，我的眼睛是闭着的。
And the stage was really short, like this height.
那个舞台是
Or
很
just a
矮的，
little
大
high
概
where
就这么
he
高，
could, he
就
sat
一点
on
点
it.
高，
It
闭
was
着
the
的。
same height as a
他就坐
chair.
在那儿，差不多就跟那个
So
椅子那么高。
everybody was talking and
每个人都
interacting.
在聊天
And my eyes were
互动
closed and the room went
我的眼睛是
quiet.
闭着的，
And that's how I
房间变
knew
安静
that
了。
he's
然后
there.
我就知道
So
他
he
就在那儿。
stood in the, I remember he was wearing
他
red.
就
He stood
我就
red
记得他
silk.
穿的红色的衣服，
He stood in the middle
红
of
的丝绸
the
衣服。
stage. And I
他站
opened my
在
eyes
舞台的
and I
中央，
recognized
我
him.
睁开眼睛，我认出他来了。
I'd never seen him in my life before.
我
But from
之前
seeing
从未
him
见
in
过
that
他，
moment, I
但
realized
是在那个
that
时刻
every
见到他
night since I
之后，我
heard
意识到，
there was no
自从我
picture
听说
and there was
到
no name in
听
the
说他来之
advertisement.
后，那个时候还没有照片，在广告上也没有
But
照片，也
since
没有
then, I
名
had
字，
dreamt
我就
about
意
him
识
every
到，
night. But since I didn't have a
之后我每
reference, a
天都
physical
梦到他。
reference, the only time I realized I was
实际上
dreaming
我
about
那
him
个时
was when I
候
saw him.
就没有一个参考。当我看到
And
他
the
的一瞬
dreams
间，我
came
就意
back,
识
and the
到
conversations in the
我
dream
梦到
came
的是
back.
他，梦都回来了，都被想起来了，梦境中
And
的
then he
对话也都
didn't
想起来了。
He didn't speak to me. I didn't know I could speak to
然后
him.
他没有跟我说话，我
For
不知道我
3
可以
years.
跟他讲话的。有
Every
3
year
年
he
我都不
would
知道
come to South Africa.
每
He would
年他
have
就
2 or
会到
3
南
darshans.
非
I would
来，
go to the darshan.
有
I
2、
never
3个达
stayed
山，
till
我
the
去参加
end.
达
I never
山。
wrote my name in
我
any
从来
of
没有
the
待到
contact
结
books.
束，我
I
从来
did
不
these
在
were
那个
things
通
I
讯录
did
上写我的名
deliberately.
字，
I deliberately did
故意
because I
这
didn't
么
want to
做
get emails.
因为我不想要收到电子
I
邮
didn't want to
件，
get SMSs.
我也不
So
想
I
收
knew
到
when he
别
was
人给我
there
发短
because it
信。
would be an
我知道
advert
他在那
somewhere,
儿，
and then I
因
would
为
go
会
to
有
the
一
event
些
and I
广
would
告，
always
然后
leave
去参
before the
加
end.
活动。我每次在结束前我就先
So
离开了。
Shivaratri, it
然后
must
是
be
世博节，
2004, 5,
大概2004或者
2005, I
05
think
年
it。was. He was giving
我
darshan
我
in
记得应该是
South
2005
Indian
年的
temple.
世博节，他在一个南印度
And
的寺庙给达
at the
善，
same time as he's giving darshan, lingams are coming out of his body.
然后他在达善的时候呢，灵家一
And
直
so
从
I
他身
go
体
to
里淡
this
出来，
darshan with a friend of mine
然后我就去
who worked at the
我有
yoga
朋友去
studio
参
where
加
the
达
first
善，
darshan was.
他是与第一
And
次
so
达
there were
善的
about
那个瑜伽
1,000
工作
people
室
there
的工作的，
because
会
it's
有
Shivaratri,
1000
they're all
人，
it's like a captive
因为这是世
audience.
博节，
And so everybody was taking darshan and doing their
固定的被
puja
动的那些一定会来参加的
So then
观众，有些人在做普济。
we decide, okay, we're going to go. I'm
我们
about
决定
10
说我们
people
去
in
参
front
加。
of my friend. We go,
就是
I'm kneeling in
大
front
概
of him. He looks down
我
at
在我
me
朋友
and
前
he
面，大
says
概
my
有
name.
10个人的
And
位
there's
置，然后
no way
我
he
跪
can
下
know it.
来，然后他就低头看着我，
Then he
然后他
says,
说了
how
我的
are
名
you?
字，
And I'm
他
like,
是不可能知道我
there
的
are
名字
so
的。
many people
然后他说你
behind
怎样？
me.
我后面有
I
好多
I
人啊，
cannot do this. It's so rude.
我没有办法
I
这么做，
didn't
因为这
know
个太
that
无
I
理
was
了。
being rude.
我不
And
知道我
so
就是
then I
无理
left.，
然后我就离开了。
And so I asked my friend, did you tell anybody? And it's
我
like,
就
no,
问我
we
的
were
朋友
sitting
说：“你
together
有
the
告
whole
诉任何
time.
人我的名字吗？没有啊，
And
我们
like
一直
then how
都
can
是
he
在一起，
know?
我俩。然后他
So
怎
we
么知道我
tried
的
to
名字
leave
呢？
and we got lost
我
for
们就要
about
离
3
开。
hours.
我们
We
有
couldn't get
3小
out
时
of the
迷路了
neighborhood.，
我
It's
没
usually
没有
easy
办
to
法走
come
出那
in
个
and
街
easy
区
to。go.
过
But we
去
don't
以
know
前
how.
是很
We
容易走进来，
literally
走进
went
走出
in
但是我们不知道
circles.
为什么，我们真的就是一直在打圈圈，迷
So
路。
that day when I went home,
然后那
the
天当我
next
回
day I was
家，
cutting up an
第
onion.
二天
And
我在切个
there,
洋葱。
Guruji was giving vibhuti at that time.
咕噜
still.
鸡那个时候还
So
给
that
大家
vibhuti was
生
on
灰
the
的，
counter in
那
front
个
of
生
me.
灰就放在
And
我面前的
I
台
was
子上，
cutting
柜
this
台
onion.
台子上，我在切这个
And
洋葱
he。 I could smell the vibhuti was so strong.
我能够
It seemed to
那个
emanate
是
out of
味
the
道非常的
bag
强烈，
and
就
fill
好
the
像它
whole
充满
room,
了
the smell.
整
Then in
个
this
房间
ear,
都充满
I
了味道
hear，
然后在我
his
这个耳
voice
朵，我能够
because
听
he
到
had
他的
spoken
声
to me
音。
the day before. Now I
因
hear
为
his
那
voice.
前一天他跟我
And it
讲话，
says
所以我听
very
到他的声音，
gently,
然后
about
他
6
非常温
times,
和的说，
a
大
name.
概说了6次，是一个名
I
字。
understand it's my name, but it's not
我
my
理
name
解
now.
它是我的名字，
So
但它其
again
实
and
不是
again
我
in
名
my
字。
ear it says
一
this
次又
name.
一次在我耳朵，他就说了这个名
It's
字。
like strange.
我想说啊，
And I
奇
carried
怪
on cutting the onion.
我继续切
I
我的
prepared
洋
lunch.
葱，
I forgot about it.
我就准备午餐，然后我就忘
Then
掉
the
了。
next morning, Guruji was
第
leaving
二天
South
早
Africa.
上，
I
咕噜鸡
learned
要离开
years
南非，
later.
我是好几年之后
I
才
was
知
on
道
the
的。
toilet,
我就
and this
在上厕
time
所，
it was like he was
然后这一次
punching
呢，
into my
就好
ear.
像他
A
打进了
name,
我的
the
耳朵
same
一
name
样。
and a surname,
同样那个名字，以及还有一
again
个姓，
and
一
again
次
and
又一
again
次
into my ear,
又一
about 8
次
or 9
打进了
times.
我的耳，大概8、9次
I
这
got
样。
up after
我
finishing
站
my
起来
business. I
我上完
went
厕
to
所
the
我就站起来，
telephone. The flyer from the
我就去拿
darshan was
电话，
there. I
然后达
dialed the
善的那
number of
个
the
广告
person who
单
was
张，
arranging
我
the
拨了
darshan, and I
那个
said
安排
these
达善的
words.
人的电话号码，
I
我就
need
说了
to
这些
know
话。
who he is
我需要
and
知
how
道
I
他
can
是
serve
谁，
him.
以及我如何服务他。
So everything fell into its
所以
right place.
所有一切就回归他正确的
Right.
位置了。
For each of us, how we come to him,
我
how he
们
comes
每
to
一个
us,
人如何到达他那里，他如何到我们这里，
that he gives this reason
他
and structure
给了这个
and possibility
理
for
由以
us
及
to become
指示以及
that
可能性，
steady
让我们
happiness,
能够有这种稳
to
定的
obtain
快
the
乐，
goal that is
能够
possible
获
for
得
us,
真达我们的
to
目标，
uncover,
而这
to
是对我们来
purify
讲是可
all
能的，
of these things
能
that
够
we're
展示
doing.
出，
You are
能够
here.
净化出我们在这
You
里所
seek
做的所
out
有一
his
切。
presence, his association,
我们追寻他的
so that
存
you
在，
can
他的连结，
navigate
这样
through
你能够穿
your
越
self-interest,
度过那些
through
你
our self-importance,
就是你觉
to
得
what
自己
is
是最重要的那
at
些
the
利
center
己
of
主
our
义啊，
lives.
妄自尊大，然后到达我们生命的真正
handbags,
的中心点，
husbands,
那些包包啊、
houses,
丈夫啊、
wives,
房子啊，
all of
妻
these
子啊，
things
所有这些东
are the
西
benchmarks for the real
都是一
thing we
些
yearn
基准
for.
点，是我们所真正渴望的
By
是东西
nature, we
的
are
基准
devoted.
点。本性我们就是会为投入其中的，
By
会致力于
nature,
这
we
些东西。
yearn
我们
to
的
have a
本性就是会
relationship with
渴
the
望
infinite.
与那个无限的
We
要有一
just
段
do
关
it
系的，
through
这
the
是我们的
lens
本
of the
性。
wrong knowledge.
我们只是通过
And
错
when
误
we are
的知识
disappointed
的
enough,
镜头来
it points us
做这些事情。
to the
当
right
我们足
knowledge.
够失望的时候，他就给我们指出了正确的
And so when
知
he's
识。
telling us, read the Bhagavad
他就
Gita,
告诉我们说要读《佛梵歌》，
practice your Kriya. He
练
knows
习你的克里
what
亚
we'll。find.
他知道我们会发现什么，
He knows that then that
他知道
divine presence will become
那个神性的存在
real for
会
us here
成为
and
对
real
我
for
们在
us
这个位置会成为
everywhere.
真正的，并且对我们来讲会于一
And
切
then we
处都
don't
成为
have
真
to
实的。
rent
那我们
happiness
就不再需要
from
租
anywhere.
一点点快乐，从任何
Because
地方
renting
来租
means
借
you
一
can
点点
be
快乐了，因为租
evicted.
意味着你是可以被赶出去的，或者是驱逐出去的，
So I hope it
因为
was
是租来的，不是属于
helpful
你的。
for you.
我希望这些对你们有帮助。
And I hope that you can see
我希望
the reality of
你
his
们能够
endless
看到
effort.
他的无尽的努力的
That
这个
everything
实
he's
相。
doing is so
他做
that
的
we
所
can
有一
remember
切
ourselves.
是为了
We
让
can
我们能
remember
够
our
铭记着
connection.
我们自己，铭记着我们的连
And
接。
that's worth more than a handbag.
这可比
Jai
一个
Gurudev
包包有价值多了。Jai Gurudev。
Do you have any questions?
大家有什么问题吗？
Yes? Yeah? What? How can you keep what? Oh, no, I didn't finish telling you, right? So you
我
can
前面
give
故事还
her.
没讲完。
Yeah, ask your question again. I didn't hear.
再问一下你的问题。
I would, when we do meditation and then we saw this light, how can we keep it?
当我们练冥想的时候，
The same way you keep
看到
anything
主
by
角的光，我们
practice.
如何维持它？就像你维持所有东西
Practice
一样，
makes
通过
permanent.
练习，练习可以让它
So
变
I
得持久。
yearned for this feeling of
所
God's
以
presence,
我
right?
渴望
My
这
whole
种神
life.
的存在的感受，我
And
整个
then-
一生都在渴望。
So after meeting him that series of
在见到
times,
他之后，
and then he became
见了几次
really
之后呢，
important in my life.
然后他就
And
变成我生活中真正非常重
he
要的。
didn't make it easy. It wasn't
他没有
like
让
we
事
were
情变得容易。
instantly buddies and
而不是
No.
说突然之间就是好兄弟啊这样的，不是这
so
样
for
的，
8 years it was like being in a car
大概有
crash
8
again
年，
and again.
就好像是一次
Because
又
he
一
was
次
showing
的
me
撞车祸
The same
当中那
thing
种感觉，因
that
为他
I'm
给我展示
seeking
的是
for
我
myself
所
that I
追寻
want.
的，为我自己所追寻我
So
所
he
想要
spent a
的。
lot of time
他花了
showing
好
me.
多时间给我展
And
示，
then one day
然后
I
有
was
一
in
天
Mauritius,
我在毛里求斯，
and by now I was so aware of what it is that
现
he's
在我
doing
是
for
非
me.
常意识到，就是他为我所，
And that
我
even
能够
though
完
it was
全觉知到他
painful,
为我所做的，
I was
哪怕是
determined.
非常的痛苦，
And I remember
我
one
也
day
下
asking
定
him,
决
don't
心。
abandon me,
我
even
记
though
得有
I'm
一
such
天，
a,
我请求他说：“
I'm
你不
so
要离开我，
selfish, and I'm so, he said to me
哪
one
怕
day,
我
I
如
have
此的
no
自
use
私。”
for your
然后
mind.
有一天，他
I'm
对我
not
说
interested：“ in
你的
your
头
mind.
脑对我毫无用处，我对你的头脑没有任
And I
何兴
remember
趣。”
holding his hand and saying to him,
然后我记得
because
我
I
抓
mean,
着他的
it's
手
a，lot.
跟他说：“
And the
因为
natural
这意味
reaction
着
that we
好
have
多
when we're in pain is
自然的
to
反应，
hasta la
就是当我
vista.
们就是我们在处在痛苦当中的时候，我们自然的反
But
应就
he
是想
didn't
要
give me
再
that
见，想要离
feeling.
开。但是他没有给我那种感受。
And then I remember at some point
然后
it
我
was
记得
just
后
there.
来
The feeling
在
of
那
the divine presence was just
那
there.
种神的灵存在的感受
It's
就
like I-
在那儿。
I can't say that I got up one day and it was
我
just
不能说
there.
我有一天起来就感受到了，
And it has been there.
而是它就在那儿，它过去也一
Once he
直在
showed
那
me
儿。
what it is like
曾经他给
to
我
be
展示
without it.
出
It happened here.
没
He was
有
leaving to go
会
to
是怎样的，
Latvia.
就在这儿发生。有一天他要离
And
开去拉脱
he
维
was
亚，
eating breakfast before going.
他在
So we
离
were
开
sitting,
前
and he
出发
didn't
前
look at
用
me
早
the
餐
whole，
我
time.
们坐在那儿，他没有，他
So
一
it's
直没有
like,
看
that's
我。
strange.
我想着说啊，这好奇怪，
And so I left the room because I felt
我就离
I
开房
felt
间，因为
the
我感受
deliberate,
到那
um,
种就是故意的
like，he deliberately was not looking at me,
他就
was not
故意的没有看
communicating
我，
with me.
不与我交流
And，so I left the room.
所以我就
And
离
then
开
he
了
left,
房
and I didn't
间。
get to see him before he left.
他离开就出发去
And
拉
as
脱
he
维亚之
left
前，我就没有
the
再见他。
ashram,
当他离开
the
那个进
feeling
修
of
中心，
presence
那
disappeared.
种
It
那
was the
种灵
worst.
神存在的灵赛的
I
感
think
受消
I
失了
can't，describe to you the
那是最糟
sensation.
糕的。我没有
And
办
so
法
I
向你描
wrote
述那
him
种
a
感受。
text, and I told him
我就给他
this.
发了个短信，我就跟他
And his
说
reply
了这
was so
些。
amazing.
他
He said,
回答真是很
"You
惊奇，
who
他
are
说
dear to me,：“
你
should
是与
never
我亲
doubt
近的，永远
never
不应
doubt
有
who
疑
I
虑，
am."
永远不应有疑虑
And
于
immediately
我
the
是谁。”
sensation
马上立即那种
returned, and
感
it's
受
a,
又
it
回来
is
了，
a sensation. It
它
is
就是一种感受，
continuously present. I feel
它
it.
是持
all of
续
the
的
time.
存在的。
So it doesn't matter
我一
what's
直能感受
happening
到，
outside. We can
所
be
以无
doing
论
this
外
and
在
doing
发生
that.
什么，我
If
做
I
这个，我
sit
做那
down, or
个。
even if I'm
如
standing
果坐下
here
来，甚
and
至
I'm
我
closing
站在
my
这
eyes like I'm
里，
doing now,
我闭上
I
我的
can
眼睛，
feel
就像我
this
现在这样，我
sensation.
能够感受到这种感受。
So to close, in conclusion, the highest
结尾的时
yoga
候来说一下，
is when
最
you
高的
place your
瑜伽
devotion
是
where it should
你
be.
把你的奉爱放在它应
And
该
the
在的
way
位
to
置。
get there is through all
去
the
到那里
things
的路
that are your
径是
obstacles.
通过 你所有的
It's not
障
about
碍，
avoiding difficulty.
不是关于避
or asking
免那
him
些
to take it
艰
away.
难、困难，或者要求他
You
把
have what
那
you
些
have
困难
because
去
it's
掉。
yours.
你拥有
And
你
when
所
you
拥有的，
take
因为它是
shelter
你
in
的。
him, your
当
life
你
is
在
not
他
your
那里
business
寻求庇
anymore.
护，你的生活就不再是你
In
的事情了。
practical ways,
以实用的
on a
方式来说，
day-to-day basis,
在一天又一天
by
的日常
remembering
当中，
him through
通过
the
铭记
name,
着他，
by remembering him through the
圣名，
things that you have to,
通过
that you ought
你
to do.
需要、你应该要做的
He
那
makes the
些事情，
transformation.
它让转化发生。
Because what is it we are looking for is already with
我们
us.
所寻找的已经与我
So
们
that's
同在
the。conclusion. Now, any
这就
questions?
是我们今天的结尾。大家有什么问题吗？
Anyone else?
其他人想问
So
什
you
么
may
吗？
think that he doesn't know what he's doing,
你可能
but
认为
honey,
他不
he
知道自己
knows
在做点什么
what，
但是亲爱
what
的，
he's
他知道他在做什么。
Jai Gurudev.
Yeah.
So you were speaking
Jai
about
Gurudev.
these obstacles that are in between
你说了这些
me
障碍
and Guruji, and there were a lot
在
of
我和古鲁
obstacles
基
that
之
I can
间的
recognize, but
有
what
好
about
多障
the
碍，
obstacles
我
that
可
I
以
cannot
认出
see
来。
for
但是那些
myself?
我看不到的障碍呢？
I think that our awareness works in stages.
我们的
So
意
when
识
you
是有
clean
不同
something,
阶段的。
like if you
当
clean
你
a
清理一
garden,
个东西，就
you
像你
clean the
清理一
things
个
you
花
can see
园
at，the moment, right?
就
And
是
so maybe you
清
have
理
to
是你
cut the
目前能看
grass
到的
and you
东
have to
西，
dig.
你切一切，
And
割一割
then
草啊，挖一
when you
挖。
apply the instruction that you
然后
should clean
当
this
你
garden, and you
你开
start,
始就是执行那个你应该清
only
理这
when
个
you
花园
finish
的
the
指示
initial,，
只
then
有
more
然后你就
things
开始
can
了。然后
become
当你
available for you
结
to
束了
see
最初
or
的那些东
change
西，
or
然后更
so
多的
your
事情才
knowledge
能够
becomes
进入，
more
让你能够看到，让你能够变
more
化。
flexible.
这时候你的
And then you
知识
can say,
就变得
okay.
更加的
And so
有
what
弹
you're
性。
saying is that
你然后
there
你
may
就可
be
以能
things
看
that
到，
stand in between me and him
你说
that
的
are
是
visible
在
and
我他
clear because
和
they
他
have
之
to do
间
with
有一些
my
是能够
survival, for
看得见的
example,
东
or the
西。
money that's coming in and out of my life,
比如
because that's
说
of
就是
concern.
我要
But then
活
there
下
are
去，
other
我
things
有
that
一
are
些
less
需要一些收
are
入
visible
钱
to
等
me
等，但是还
that
有
I
一些
may
其他东西
secretly
是对我
not
来讲看
believe
不
that
清
I'll
的。
be helped in this situation or in that situation. And so I can only
比如
address
说，我能
what
够暗地
comes when it
里，
comes. You can't do it
我暗地
before
里
it's
认为
before it's
会
there.
发生或者不会发
And
生。
so the
我只能说
recitation of the name is for that reason. The
有一
recitation of the
些
name we do usually because we want something, like we are looking for peace, right?
我
But
们
the only reason
唱
we
诵
should
圣名
recite
的
is for
时
the
候，
sake of recite.
我们有的
of
时候是为了
reciting.
平
It's
静，
like
为了
when
宁
you
静
clean the，
但实际
garden.
上我们念诵圣
You
名
clean
就
for
是
the
只是
because
为
you
了
have
念
to
诵
clean.
圣名的缘故而已。
What you will
你
discover
清理
and
花
how
园
things
就
will
是为
change are
了
not
清理
known
花
to you
园。
in the first
你
blow
会
of the
发现什
hoe
么，或
or in
者
the first
会改变
cut.
什么？当你在
But as
第
things
一下的时
progress,
候，或者在第一次
you
割草的
become
时候，
more
你是
adept.
不知道的。
and you develop more trust.
然后，当你变得越来
And
越
you get
娴
more
熟，
knowledge.
你建立了更多的信
And
赖，
so
你获得了更多
only
的知识
time,。only
那
time
么，
is
只有
your
在那
friend,
个
and
时候，
consistency is your friend. You
只
have
有
no
只有时
idea
间是你
what
的
can
朋友，
be
只
uncovered.
有只有维持、持续，只有持续稳定才是你的朋友。时间是你的朋友，稳定持续也是你的朋友。
Not so good, but you say that we are doing like this, but it's not that long.
你刚说，
inside.
我们这么做，但它不是内在的渴望。
but it's not that longing.
你说我们这么做，
to
但
God.
不是
And I
那
want to
种
ask
对
because
神的
this
渴望。
longing
我
is
想要
the
问的
most
是，
strong we feel in our lives.
Yeah.
So what is the difference from longing we don't
这
understand and
两种渴
longing
望
we have inside?
有什么区别？就是我们之内的渴望和我们不太理解
So
的那
when
种渴
you
望
fall
中间
in
的
love
区
with
别是什么？
someone,
当
right,
你爱上
it
某人
goes
坠
in
入爱河
different
的时候，
stages.
它是有不同的阶
The
段的。
first thing that makes you fall in love with someone is
让
the way
你
that they
最初坠
knowledge
入
you
爱
gain
河
from
的
your
时候，
eyes.
是你从你眼睛
So
获
the
得的
knowledge
知
you gain
识，
from your eyes, or is he looks, or she looks
是
the way that
他
I
看上
like.
去 是否是我喜
And
欢
then
的
the
样
next thing
子。
you do is you try to acquire
然后
information about that person.
之后你做的是
So you
你
go
获得那
onto
个
their
人的信
Facebook,
息
onto their
知识，
Instagram, you learn their
你知道他
name,
们
and
的
then
脸书、
you learn where they
Instagram，
live and
看他
what
们的
they
名
like,
字，
and so you
看
build a
看他们
whole
喜
story.
欢的那些东
Right?
西，你就建
And
立了
then
一
so
个
the
完整的
next
故
thing
事。
that you
然
do
后下一件
is
事
you
情
want to
你
get
做
into
的
the
是
proximity of that
你
person.
想要
So
接
you
近
try
这
by
个
every
人，
means. So as much
利用
information
各种
as you
方法，
have, you can then
尽可能
use.
多的你所拥
So
有的
if you
那些
know
信息，你
that
就可以
they
利用
like
到
the
他
smell
们。
of this
如果你也知
perfume,
道他们
what
喜
will
欢
you
这
wear?
个香水的味道，你
That
会用哪个香
perfume.
水呢？
If you know they
就会
like
用
to
那个
eat
香
this
水。
kind of
如
food,
果你也知道
what
他们
will
喜
you
欢吃这
do
种食物，
when eventually
你会
you
怎么
come
做
into
呢？
each other's
然后
space?
最后
You try your
你们进入
best.
彼
And
此
the
的空间，
place
你
that
们
it
尽
takes
最
to
大的努
is you
力。
being together with each other.
然后那
Right?
个地方
So
是
the
就
whole
是变
work
成了你们彼此
is to
在一
get
起，
that.
然后
So
所
that
有的
much
努力
longing,
都是为
that
了达
much
到这一
yearning,
点。
that much,
那种渴
and so many
望，
things you add to it. So you are chanting all the
你
time.
加上了各种东西，你一直在唱
Josephine
诵说
Josephine,
Josephine，
Josephine, you cannot sleep, you cannot eat,
Josephine，
you cannot.
你无
The
法
yearning
睡
is growing
眠，
and
你
growing.
茶
By
饭不
knowledge,
思，
the yearning
你
can
的
grow.
渴望一直在增长，通过知识，你的渴
So you
望
can
增长
pretend
了。
to yearn, and everybody
所以
can
可以
raise
假
their
装
hands
渴
and say
望，
Radhe,
每个
Radhe.
人都可以举举说拉贴拉贴，
But through knowledge,
但是通过
the
知识，
yearning can grow.
渴望可以增
When
长。
Rukmini was writing the letter to
当
Krishna, she said to
验
him,
光
I am in this
Rukmini 写
location.
给
Only you
Krishna
can
写
come
信
and
的时候，
take
他说
me.
我在这个地方，
She could
只
say
有
because
你
she
能来
had
把我带走。
knowledge
他
of
可以这
him.
么说，是因为他有 Krishna 的知识。
So the same for you. If you understand,
对你来讲也是一样的。
He is
如果
the
你能够理解，
controller. You are the controller.
他是那个
He
掌
is the
控者，你是
protector.
被掌
You
控
are
者，
the
他是保
protected.
护者，
He is the
你是被保
provider.
护的，
You are the
他
one
是
being
提供者
provided for. What is the
你是
concern?
那个被提供的人，你
He
还
know
要
how
忧
to
虑
do
些
his
什么呢
job.？
他知道他应该怎么做自己的事儿。
Why do we turn only in situations that are difficult
为
for
什
us
么
to
只
handle?
有在那些
When somebody is dying of
我们
cancer,
难以
you
应
think,
对
oh,
的情况下，我们才转
first
身的？
chemotherapy,
有人
then why not him first?
有人要死于那个癌症的时候，你觉得他们首先是怎么呢？化疗。
I remember I
这个
was
治疗
telling
那个治
him
疗，
or
为什么死的
asking
不是
from
别人呢
him,？
记得我曾
somebody
经
had
问过
asked me
国
to
际
ask
说，
him for help.
有人
And he said,
要求我
"What did they do
从他那
before
里，
this?"
有人请我从他那里
And so I said
找
all the things
帮
they'd
助。
done. And I
然
said,
后
oh,
国际
so
问
he
说
said,
他之
so
前干
I'm
了
the
点什
last
么，
resort.
然后我说了所有，然后我就把他们做的所有的事情讲了一遍。然后古鲁吉说啊，我是他们最
This
后
is
求助的，
understanding devotion
这就
and
是
longing.
一个
I
可以
can't
被
say
理
that
解
I
的那
long
种
for him
奉爱
unless
及
I
渴
have
望。我
knowledge.
我没有办法说，我渴望他，除非我有
Because
那
it
个知识，
becomes my way
因为它就变成了我的那个路径方法，
and not knowledge that if the knowledge is not
而不是那
transforming
种知
me,
识说，
if
如
it's
果那个
not
知识没有办
making
法
me
转
like
化我，
clay
而
that
没有
can be molded,
让我变成就
into a
像
useful
可
shape.
以塑造的粘土，可以
if
塑
it's
造为
not
一个有用的
bringing me
形
to the
态的
place
话，
where
如
happiness
果
can
那个知
become
识没有把
steady,
我带到
then it's not of
快乐
any
是可以
use.
成为稳定的话，那么这个就是没有用的。
Anything else?
还有什么要问的吗？
There. And then here and then done.
这位，然后这位，然后我们就结束。
Take
At the
it.
beginning, he described Arjuna how already he was like the top of all
He was
possibilities.
at
开
the
始的时候
top.
已经描述了阿周呢，他已经是最顶
Yeah,
端
yeah,
的。
yeah. I think that's why it was chosen. That's why it was chosen. He be a Kshatriya, he be in the royal family, he
他成为一
be.
个刹帝
But
利，
then look at
出生在
Krishna,
皇家
right?。His
然
life
后你
from the
看一下
outside is like
Krishna，他的
born in
外界
prison,
看他的生活，他是出生在监狱里的吧
exchanged. It's like a
调换了一
riches
下
to rags to riches to
就像
rags kind of story.
最富有的去到了最那个贫穷的，然后去到了最富有的，这样调来调去。
Not even close to this stage.
But you don't know that. How many times has he
但
said
是
it?
我们甚至都
What have
不
you
靠
done
近
to come into
连
the
这个我们
so
都不
that
靠
it
近。
means
但
that
是
you have to
你不知
understand
道
really
的，
what is the
国际
quality
说了
of
多少
the
次，
guru.
你不知
What
道
must
你
he
做了
be
点什么才到
that you
现
have
在的位
access
置。
to? Just to look at
因
the
为你
Kriya,
不知
right?
道咕噜的
Navaratri
品质，
Babaji has given thousands of Kriyas
只是
over
看一下克里亚
centuries,
玛瓦的爸
or
爸级
hundreds over centuries. if you look at other
在
Kriya
数世
systems,
纪，
right?
他给了好几
And
百
you
个克
see
里亚了。
like the
如果你
most
看一下其他的克里亚的体
similar
系的
one,
话，
right?
你
I
能
will
够看
use
到
just the example of Khechari Mudra, right? So
比
you
较类似
cannot
的。
receive Khechari
我
Mudra
就是用一
until
个
you
舌
didn't
顶上
practice.
的
There's
气
one
功法
practice
做一
that
个
you
例
have to
子。
do
在其他
for
的体
half
系
an
里，
hour every
你
day for
的
at
一个练
least 4
习是你需
years
要
before you
每
get
天练
Khechari
半
Mudra.
小时，然
And
后
where do
至
you
少
receive
4
it? At the
年之
entrance
后，你
level
才能
in
够
Atma
获
Kriya
得
Yoga,
舌底
he
上的气
gives
功法。
Khechari Mudra too.
然后现在呢，
So it's
在阿玛
not
克
to
里亚瑜
say
伽，
to
你在
you
入门的时候，
that
他就已经把
and
舌底上的
it's
气
not
法给
my
了
words
你，所以
also.
我们
He
不
has
能
said
说，
already before, you have done so much
这也不是我说的，他
for you
估
to
计已
be
经说
here
过
now.
了，你已经做
Right?
了这么
And he
多
has said
在过
that
去
in
世，
this life
让
it
你
is
能够
possible
在
for
此
you
地此时
to obtain
他也
that
说
goal,
过，
not
在
because
这
of
一
you,
世对你来
but
说是
because
有
of
可能
him,
真
because
达那
he
个
is
目标
there.
的，并不是因为你，
So when we
而是
understand
因
this,
为
that
因为
the
他在这里，
opportunity we have
所以
really to
我们要
drop
理
all
解
the
这一
things we
点。
think we know
我
and
们
to
所拥有的
experience
机
the
会
direct knowledge.
要放下我们所有
That's
认
what
为
I'm
我们
meaning
认
when
为
I
我们
say
知道
knowledge.
的那些
So
要体
all
验
the
直
knowledge
接的知
contained in
识
the。Bhagavad Gita, you can memorize,
所以这就是我说知
you
识
can
这个词的意
quote,
思。
but
我
if
在
it's
梵歌
not
中所有的
going,
知识，你都可以背下来，
and if it's
你
not
可以引用，
transforming, then
但是它不会进入你的内在。
so we
如
are
果它
where
没
we
有进
have
入
to
你的内
be.
在，没有转化
This
呢，
is clear. He is who he is. This
我
is
们
also
就
clear.
处在我们所
The
应该处
path
在
is
的位
also
置，是
made
很
clear.
清晰的。他就是他，
But really
这
what
也是
we
很
are
清晰的。
endeavoring is to
道路
remove
也
our
是非
doubt.
常清晰的，但是我们要
And we can
努
only
力
do
的
that by
要做的是去
experientially
除我们的疑虑
increasing，love. And hence the
我们
technique, hence
通过
puja, hence kriya, hence it's only to make
体验式
real
的
this
能够
love
增
that is
长我们
inside
的
of us.
爱，能够做到这一点。
Because
所
more than
以
anything,
因此
we
所以就
doubt
有普及啊，所以要有练习啊
ourselves.
等等。然后这是唯一能让那个爱
And
变得
here-
真实的，
And then done.
因为我们最
Here.
大质疑的就是我们自己超过其他所有其他的。
Okay.
Jai Gurudev. When I'm experiencing so much pain in the heart and yearning and longing,
我的心中体验到这么多的痛，
and it's very constant that it
以及
carries
渴望。
on in my dreams and in my daily life as well.
在我的梦中以及在我的日常生活中，他们都在持续着。
Keeps on saying like carry on your life, do your dharma, and
估计一直在讲，
enjoy your
是
day, be
还有履
happy.
行你的达摩，继续你的生活，
But it's very
享
difficult
受
to carry these
你
both
的
things at the
日 子
same time
要
and to
保持
live
快乐。
it
但是
at the same time.
但
But
是
yet you are.
同时
You are
要
sitting
继续
here.
这些事
And both
情
things are
是非常
happening to
困
you
难的。
even
但你
now.
的确是
You
你
have
坐
the
在这儿，
possibility to smile.
所有事
You
情
have
都
the
哪
possibility
怕
to
此刻
laugh.
都在
You
发
have
生
the
着。
possibility
你
also
有
of
这个
this
可能性，微小
pain.
的可能性，大笑的可能性，
So when we
以及这个痛苦
make
的
the
可能性
mistake,。right? When we make the mistake to
所以
think that we
我
know
们当
what
我们
is
犯错的时候，
like even to begin speaking about yearning or
认为
longing or
我
pain
们
or
知
we have no
道
idea what these things
哪怕
really are,
开始
right? We
说
can
那些
estimate because we've read
渴
it
望
or
啊、痛
because
苦啊，我们
we've
实际上并不
but
知道
when
这
the
到底是什
real
么。我们可以估
experience
计，
comes, there's
因
no
为读
need
过啊、
even
阅
to
读啊，但
speak of
是
it
等真正的体验来到的时候，那就不
because you are a
需要
sister to
再
your
谈论它
sister
了，
or your brother. You are a
因为你
daughter,
是
you
你
are
姐
a
妹的姐
wife,
妹，
you are
你的兄
a
弟的姐妹，
friend, you are
你是
you
一个
play
女
all
儿、
these
妻
roles
子，
without
你是一个
flinching.
朋友，你扮
So
演着
when
所有
we
的角
enter
色，
into the
而
relationship
没
with
有
the
任何畏
divine,
惧。
right?
所
And
以
when we
我
do
们
what
进
it is
入
that is
与神的
required,
关系的时候，
what I see from him,
当我
right?
们
He's
在做
continuously
我
in
们
this
所需要
yearning.
的，
Right? I
我
can
从
say
他那里
because
所
I'm
看到
watching
的
him.
他持续的处在
What
这
I
种
see
渴
from
望
him
当
is
中
that。
我可以说
not，
因
for
为
a
我一直在观
second
察着他。
does he stop doing what
我
he
从
has
他那
to
里看到
do.
的是，没有任何一
Even
秒
though the
钟
yearning is
他
burning
停止
inside
做
of
他
him.
所要做的事情，
We
哪
were
怕那种
eating
渴望
breakfast,
在他之内燃
and he
烧。
was sitting, And suddenly his
我们每
left
天在用早餐，
eye started
他坐在
crying.
那儿， 然后突然之
The
间，
whole
他
feeling in the
的
room
左
changed,
眼
and
开
his
始
left
哭
eye
泣
started
流
crying.
泪，
And he tried to
整
hide.
个房间里的感受
it.
就改变了。
But
然
I
后
was
他的
watching him.
左眼开始哭，他开
And
始
then
隐
somebody
藏
came
他，
and
他
the
尝试着隐藏
situation，
但是我
changed.
在看着
But
他。
I knew that I want to ask
然
him
后有人
about
进
this.
来，然后情况又改变
And I
了。
knew also that I'm not
但
going to
是
go
我
up to
知
him
道
and
我
say,
想
why
要
were you
问他
crying?
是什么情况，然后我也知
So
道
I
我
was
不能
in
走过
the
去说，哎，你
kitchen
为什么要哭啊？
washing the
我不能
plates
这么
that he
问，
ate from.
所以我就
And
在
he
厨
comes
房
in because
洗
he's
他吃
replying
饭
to me
的盘子，然后他就
because I
走
want
进
to
来，
know. So he pokes his head
因为
around
他
the
就在
corner.
回应我，
And I
因
say
为
to
我想
him,
要知
what
道，
was that?
所以他就探出
And then
在
he
角落
said
探个
to
头脑，
me,
然后我就
that
跟他
was
说那是
Vittala.
啥？然后他
And
就
it
说
was enough for me to
那是
understand.
Vittala。
So in the same way, if we make our
对我来
lives,
讲，这已经足够了。所以同
how
样
to
的，
say,
如果我们让我们的
if we are
生
aiming
活
for that
怎么说呢？
one, and we
如果
know
我
the
们
steps are like
以
this,
此为目标，
right? Because we've have some
并且我
knowledge
们知道他那个步骤是那样
about
的，
what can happen, what
因为我们
doesn't
有一些
happen,
知
what
识，
the thing is
关
just
于会
get
发
on
生
with
什
it.
么，有什么没发生，
Don't spend the time thinking
那就
that it should be like
那
this,
就
or
继
I'm
续
now
下去，
feeling like
不
that,
要
or
花
why
时
am I
间来
not?
想这些
Don't
东
do
西，
this.
应该是这样啊。
It's not
我现在
necessary.
感受啊，
Because
为什么我
everything
没有感受
comes
到那些？
so
不
that
要
it
这么
can
做
go.，
不需要这样，因为所有一切来就是为了他
Just
能够走。
enjoy what you have. Just
一
enjoy,
切来的就是为了
because
能
it will
够
not last
离开，
forever.
就享受你所有拥有的，因为它不会持续的，
Take good.
永远持续的。